It being 11 o'clock, good morning and welcome to this virtual meeting of Midlothian Council. A copy of the virtual meeting protocol has been circulated, and I would draw to your attention the following. Members are aware that they should mute their microphones and only activate when invited to speak. Once you finish speaking, please remember once again to mute your microphone. Members who wish to speak should do so by using the raise hand option and lower your hand once you speak. With regards to some of the reports on the agenda, it may be necessary to ask members to vote. Votes will be taken by way of a roll call. The minute will not include the roll call vote unless a member has been successful in moving a roll call vote in terms of standing orders. The public part of the meeting is being recorded, and a copy of the recording may be uploaded to the Council's website. Should the meeting last more than 2 hours, it's my intention to break around the 2-hour mark for 50 minutes and, if necessary, repeat this again after another 2 hours. And also I'll consider a short break before we move from the public matters to private matters at the end of the paper. Could I ask Verona to indicate any apologies?
Got apologies from Mr. Bourne and Mrs. Morton. Thank you.
Order of business. This is perhaps a more unusual meeting than most, and there's a considerable number of alterations and emergency items, and I would like to ask Verona to take us through those before we commence the meeting as such.
The changes to the order of business are: the Council will be asked to determine to exercise the functions, powers and duties of the General Purposes Committee as permitted by Standing Order 7.12, to consider applications lodged under the Civic Government of Scotland Act 1982. These applications are deemed urgent because the events are scheduled to take place this weekend and a decision requires to be made as soon as possible. If members are agreeable to this, to provide sufficient time to peruse the paperwork relating to the applications, members may wish to adjourn consideration of the applications to a meeting to be held tomorrow. Item number 8.17, Beeslack Replacement High School. This will now be held in private and taken as item number 9.2. And there's an additional report accepted by the Provost for inclusion on the agenda and circulated in advance of the meeting: early learning and childcare expansion, and this will be item 8.20.
Thank you very much. In terms of the main issue here, we need to act as the General Purposes Committee if we're to make a timely decision on these two quite important applications for public licences, and the Council is entitled to act in the place of the General Purposes Committee. There's been consultation with the leaders of all the groups, and therefore I would propose that as Provost I clear these as being emergency matters, but we also require the Council itself to determine that it wishes to act in the place of the GP committee, and to that end I'd like a proposer and a seconder that we do so act with a view to holding a meeting tomorrow at a time where we are sure of having a quorum. Kath Johnson.
Thank you very much. Provost, when will the paperwork be issued for such a meeting?
Yeah, the paperwork, this is of course a rather emergency situation. The paperwork has been coming in even this morning. It'll be issued as soon as possible after this meeting, giving us around 24 hours to read and digest the matters that we're going to have to take a quasi-judicial decision on.
Thank you very much. And I can't remember if you said what time the meeting would be, because we will all need to rearrange our other activities, meetings. Yep. Other people have work commitments, so we need to know as soon as possible when that meeting is likely to be.
Yes, the likely timing, having consulted the electronic diaries that are accessible to Democratic Service, the likely timing is 12:30 tomorrow. Oh. Councillor Johnston. There being no other voices, do I have a proposer? Councillor Alexander. You're on
Sorry, I had my hand up for another reason, so yeah, no, I'm not proposing.
Provost, I'm not proposing either. I have a very important commitment at that time, and it is unlikely I will manage to attend that meeting.
Thank you. That's understood and possibly inevitable. Councillor Munro.
Thanks, Provost. I didn't want everyone just to go around and say, no, I can't make it because I think we'll be here for a while, but I won't be able to be there either. And it feels kind of silly being the person who's in charge of running GP, not being able to be there.
That's true. I mean, we require a quorum, which my understanding would be 6. Councillor Cassidy.
I'll propose it, Provost.
Thank you. Have we a seconder? Councillor Hardy.
Happy to second, Provost.
Thank you for that. Do I see any contrary motions? Councillor Munro, is that a legacy hand?
It is indeed.
Are there any contrary voices? That being the case, Democratic Services will furnish the usual schedules as if it's a GP committee and furnish all the information by those seeking the licenses, and also documentation relating to those who have objected, and guidance as to the conduct of the meeting, which is expected to be at 12:30 tomorrow. Thank you all very much. Declarations of interest. Councillor Parry.
I think Councillor Alexander was before me, actually, Provost.
Yep, keen eye. Councillor Alexander.
Hi, yes, good morning, Provost. Can I just make, I don't know if it's a complaint, but we just seem to be this time getting so many papers at the last minute, and they're all on different emails. So it's going to be really hard to navigate them all. I know that some of them are in the box of files, but not all of them. Could I make a request that in the future, if there are such papers to be put forward, that they're all put into one folder so that it can be, we can get it quite seamlessly when we come to the meeting. I have asked for this today, but it seems that we can't do that today. So in future, could I ask that something is put up so that we can do this?
Yes, I'm very sympathetic to that point. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I just wanted to query why the Beeslite replacement paper was now being held in private. I didn't hear a reason for that.
It obviously relates to land issues, but we have debated it before. Perhaps guidance from Democratic Services or from Mr. Venters on that?
Yes, thanks, Provost. Essentially, the report contains proposals, commercial proposals, in relation to the acquisition of land for the site for Beeslack School, but also the potential award of contracts for services and works in relation to the procurement of the building. So the basis is effectively disclosure of that information to the public is likely to prejudice the council's commercial interests.
Provost, can I just advise that given that that paper wasn't private and hasn't been made private until now, that information has already been shared? Yeah, completely pointless now to hold it in private.
That may be so, except of course the discussion will be private. Perhaps Democratic Services could comment on that.
The paper's not been public, Councillor Parry. It's not been on the public web, on the website as public document.
Okay, but perhaps we could have a discussion after this meeting on Councillor Alexander's suggestion that somehow where we have a bundle of late papers, that at least they can be consolidated in the same place. Because one of the pressures is this is the last meeting before the summer break, so a number of items which relate to the educational term starting had to come in today. But I agree, it is difficult to navigate the collection of papers we now have. We move on to declarations of interest. You may declare these at any point during the currency of the meeting. There being no deputations, we then move on to the minutes of the 11th May 2021. Are there any issues arising not covered otherwise? Could I see a proposer for the minutes? Someone be brave. Councillor Hackett, thank you. And Councillor Hardy seconding. There being no questions to the council leader, we now move to the motion put forward by the Labour group, which you'll find on your papers. And it's on page 14 of 203. Could I ask Councillor Milligan to talk to this motion?
Thanks, Provost, and because of connection problems, I'll keep my video off. The motion is really, it's quite straightforward. I think we're all become aware of the numerous groups that are out there that are collecting litter, that are weeding, that are tidying, that have taken on all different responsibilities. And I think they're doing a fantastic job. However, we are wanting to be clear as to how we're going to work and support these groups, and therefore we're asking for a report back on how that's going to happen. Further, when the cross-cutting service review with services, there was a proposal that was fully accepted by council to replace a lot of the older, smaller bins with larger, better bins and additional bins in areas where it was busy. Now that doesn't seem to have materialised so far, so we'd like to a report back on just where that is, what's happened with that recommendation, and ask for it to be done. I've also become aware that in several areas the UK or Great Britain, there are councils that are now using private companies that have been brought in to enforce and to pursue people who are dog fouling, people who are littering, people who are fly tipping. And I think it would be good to get a report back with the potential to see if that's something that Midlothian Council should do. One of the areas, for example, that we look at where we brought in the private sector was on the parking, where we decriminalised parking. Now that seems to have worked quite well for the council. And I'm not asking for any decisions on here. I think it would just be good to get all that information back on how other councils are dealing with this, because if you look at our environmental officers now, most of them are tied up dealing with all the COVID stuff, and our record in actually pursuing fly tippers and people who let their dogs foul without clearing up that, it's not a great record. So I think we really need to have a look to see, is there an alternative to this that helps support the groups that are trying to make a difference out there.
Thank you, Leader. Can I ask John Hackett, Councillor Hackett, to second the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Provost. And I haven't got much more to add than what Derek's already contributed, but just to add my weight to the number of community groups that have sprung up to support tidying our public spaces, the litter picking, the weeding, the flower beds work. I know Councillor Custody, for example, had a lot of connection with Dalkeith Guerrilla Gardeners, and I know they've inspired lots of groups, not just in Midlothian, but starting out in Edinburgh now, and other parts of the Lothians. I've had the conversation with the service about what we can do to improve how we support community groups. And I'm also aware that because there's so many, it's putting an onus on the council to respond to that. So we want to do that well. There's nothing worse when you turn up to volunteer and you're not feeling like a good response from the council. I have to say, almost all the reports I get back are very positive. I know Justin and the waste team, they're always quick to respond to collect stuff that people have picked up. But there's more of these groups I think will spring up, and I would like to see us doing more to support these groups, and particularly as restrictions ease, there'll be more social activities surrounding these things. So it's how can we use our parks and public spaces to support these groups and attract more people. And similar to Derek, you know, in terms of fly tipping, being a councillor that represents a rural area, fly tipping comes up on a weekly, if not daily basis. So anything we can do that's creative to try and tackle that, I think would be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think many councillors are aware that the Police, Fire and Rescue Committee had a very extensive discussion of fly tipping, including our own environmental health officers recently. Indeed, I had expected a paper to be available at this meeting, given the increased public anxiety over fly tipping. I wonder if Derek Oliver could perhaps comment as to where we are in the preparation of that paper, if he's around.
Thanks, Provost. Yes, the paper is being drafted up with a suite of interventions being proposed, and I'm happy to bring this forward after recess for members to consider and approve if necessary. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Just a couple of comments, if I could. I guess the first one is just to point out, I thought that it was quite odd that there is a motion here from the administration. I find that an odd approach, but I do wholly agree with the sentiment, and I think that the people who are out there in our communities every weekend, evening, are just doing the most amazing job. I'm glad that Councillor Hackett mentioned the efforts of Councillor Cassidy, who has put in an absolute shift in his community over the last few years, and I know that many of the SNP group do that as well. So hats off to them for that. But just while the leader there was talking about listening to communities, I'm aware that many of these groups that have formed have spoken really strongly about the use of glyphosate as well. So while we're listening to them about litter picking and bins, can we also listen to them about the issue of glyphosate, because they do have very strong opinions on it, and we are still using it. I got concerns expressed from my own constituents in Roslin, because that had been sprayed with glyphosate last week as well. So more a comment from me, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you. That would be a subject for a very lengthy debate at another time. Councillor Winchester.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I agree with the sentiment too. It's very good. However, the Conservative group in May 2019 actually brought a motion very similar to this, which was unanimously agreed, asking for a report to come back, giving suggestions and working smart. I can't see that a report ever came back from then, sorry.
Yes, I think Derek Oliver will be effectively curing that delay, which no doubt was influenced by lockdown and the rest. But we clearly need to progress on this subject of fly tipping in view of the prevalence during lockdown of antisocial behaviour of this nature. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks very much. I do agree wholeheartedly with bringing a report back to Council to see what better we can do. But call me a cynic, but on page 17 in the next report, it states that the Accounts Commission tells us that we should continue to build on positive elements of community empowerment. It should look to increase community ownership of local neighbourhood plans and work with communities to improve how they monitor progress. So it feels to me like the administration has just been prompted into doing this. I've been a volunteer for about the past 15 years in my local park picking up litter, and I've never ever told people about it until quite recently. But I'm glad that the Labour Party's acknowledging the wealth of talent and the hard work. But it's not just volunteers who are tidying up our grass verges and our parks and hedgerows and the rural roads, etc. We've got volunteers who do an enormous pile of good. There's loads and loads of football teams that adults give up their time to keep children busy and active. There's scouts and brownies and cubs and rainbows and girls' brigade and boys' brigade outfits that help our children form good discipline and relationships with the community as well. So I think we need to be very careful that we don't sideline all these additional groups. I would like to add an addition to the motion, and I think it should say the Provost reception should be reinstated on an annual basis to publicly and formally acknowledge the volunteers' contribution to the work in Midlothian. Obviously, we understand that all the volunteers cannot be invited at the same time, done on the same basis as it was done previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. That I think was expressed as an amendment to the motion. There was, I think, some transmission problem with the sound. I just wonder if Democratic Services were able to pick that up. I think your purpose is to emphasise the input of voluntary groups, which the motion commences with.
Yes, yeah, it's not just litter and all that kind of volunteers are doing. They're doing a power of good in other places. We have volunteers who work with disabled adults and children, football clubs, all the church activity groups, Cubs, Scouts, Brownies, Rainbows. There's a whole raft of volunteers, and we absolutely cannot exclude and sideline volunteers who do a power of good in our community.
Yeah, I think you're extending the congratulations in terms of the groups involved. I just want to check whether that's acceptable to the proposer and seconder of the motion. I see Councillor Hackett has his hand up.
I wouldn't object to a report that wanted to explore bringing back the provost reception and what that would look like and the safety considerations and the costs. I've got no problem including that as part of this motion. But just to comment, I'm not trying to sideline anyone in this motion. It's specifically looking at some of the groups that have been active around tidying up town centres, issues around litter and issues around fly tipping. And in talking about that, I'm in no way seeking to sideline any other group. So just to refute that comment, I suppose. Thank you.
Yeah, the question remains whether you and Councillor Milligan are agreeable to Catherine Johnson's amendment and
whether Provost.
Yeah, okay, and Democratic Services, were you able to get the text of that?
Yes, Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alexander, then Councillor Wallace.
Yes, just to echo some of the points made there, one with Councillor Parry on the glyphosate. I think that's a very important issue that we should be looking into. And also echoing Councillor Johnson, the contribution made by voluntary people is, the last time I heard, it was around about £55 million to the budget of Midlothian. So surely we can bring some sort of thanks to all the people who do volunteer and give their time up to the different organisations in Midlothian. Private companies to do this work, I'm very, very dubious about that. I think the work does need to be done, but I think it needs to be done in-house. And if we have the budget to employ private companies, I'm sure that that budget would be available to ourselves. And if it's going to be at zero cost, I can't see the problem. So yes, those are my issues.
Thank you for that contribution. There's been a report that the broadcast is not being accessed by the public. I wonder, Marco, you could comment on that in Democratic Services as to how we should proceed. Specific comment from Dalkeith Community Council, I think.
Let me just investigate, Provost.
In the interim, are we safe to continue with the meeting?
Yes, but the meeting's being recorded anyway on top of the live stream, so it will be available afterwards.
Thank you. So we have a motion. We have a proposer, a seconder, who have accepted the amendment from Councillor Johnson. Councillor Johnson's amendment, I think, is effectively seconded. Can we therefore all agree the composite motion that we now have and move on to item 7.1? Best Value Assurance Report update from Dr. Vickers. Page 15.
Thank you, Provost. So this report is for noting and provides Council with an update on the Best Value Improvement Action Plan. Some of the actions have also been superseded as a result of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Midlothian route map and the new strategic transformation boards. The report recommends Council to note the update presented today. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Contributions from the floor? I take that a thorough approbation of the work that's gone in here. Thank you very much indeed. We move to item 8.2, the single Midlothian plan. Grace Vickers.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to present to Council the single Midlothian plan for the year ahead. This plan has been approved by the CPP board, and today this report recommends that Council notes the publication of the single Midlothian plan for 2021-22. I would also like to bring Council's attention that as we recover from this pandemic, it is important that our improvement plans connected to this report and the report which follows as item 8.3 on today's agenda are responsive to emerging needs, and therefore if any significant changes occur, we would of course alert Council to these.
And we're not letting you off. We have 8.3, the service plans.
Thank you, Provost. So this report is for decision and follows on from the previous single Midlothian plan report. This report presents to Council our 2021-22 service plans, and the report recommends Council to approve these service plans.
There being no comments, that is again approbation. Items 8.4 to 8.6, I think Myra was going to be able to talk to these.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, thank you. So 8.4 is a report for noting, and it's regarding the Midlothian Council Annual Complaint Handling Report for 2019 to 2020 and the revised Midlothian Complaint Handling Procedure. Council is asked to note the publication of the Midlothian Council Annual Complaint Handling Report for 2019 to 20 and the introduction of a revised Midlothian Council Complaints Handling Procedure with effect from the 1st of April 2021. Appendices included in the appendix document at page 251 is the annual complaint handling report, and the appendix for 272 is the model complaints handling procedure. I'm aware of the numerous reports on today's agenda, Provost, but I'm happy to take any questions or provide any further information if required on either of those appendices.
Thank you very much, Mara. And I know that there are 500 pages of appendices, and I don't expect every councillor has read every single one of them. We do occasionally get complaints that I've tried for 2 or 3 times to complain about something of the, and very often councillors intervene at that point. But have we sharpened our performance in that department?
Whilst this new procedure has been brought in to, I suppose, further support this one-tier system of complaint handling. Akin to this, we've also got a new customer service e-platform coming in, and we've certainly aligned this revised procedure with the new platform that should give us better access to both the information and monitoring of reports, and there will also be additional training incorporated with the new procedure and the new system to ensure that officers are aware of expected turnaround times, for example, the exact stages that reports come in and what should happen when reports come in. So there will be further training, and the system should certainly help support that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Well, you'll be pleased to know that I have read all the pages, Provost, and it's enormous and it takes a really long time, and you've got to be on the ball when you're reading the whole thing. So I wondered if there could be a summarised version which the public will be able to access, which will be more of a signposting document for them to use, because you have to rifle through a whole list of stuff to find out what you want to do and how to do it. I think that would be a good idea. Well, it would be for somebody like me. Thank you.
Yes, we have to access these through CMIS, which I don't think is normally open to the public. Should we take this back to the Standing Orders Working Party? There's this question of balance, because we put too much into the council papers. You know, there are 200 plus pages already. Then we end up with the problem just being shunted from one area to the other, plus the difficulty of creating a précis in what can be very granular work. Don't know if services.
Sorry, Provost, if I could comment on that, please, Provost.
Yes, sure.
Just to say that whilst this report provides the full procedure documentation that staff have access to, part 5 of the procedure is actually published on the council's website, and that is with the view to members of the public being clear on what the procedure is and how they can access the reports. So from a public perspective, part 5 is certainly already published, and that's how they would access the complaint handling procedure.
Thanks for that clarification. So perhaps a link to part 5 would have, or a copy of that in this document would have been helpful. But this is something we regularly discuss with democratic services, so I'm happy to carry Councillor Johnson's comments back to that forum. There being no other comments, we have the equality plan.
Thank you, Provost. That would be me again. So 8.5 looks at the Midlothian Equality Plan for 2021 to 2025 and also shares the Midlothian Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Progress Report. Council are asked to note the contents of the Equality Plan for 2021-25 and the Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Progress Report for 2019 to 2021. Just to make Council's aware, this is legislative requirement that we do consider equalities on a 2-year cycle, and we publish equality outcomes every 4 years. My colleague Leslie Crozier, the Equalities and Diversity Officer, is also on the call today, so I'm happy to take any questions, again because there are sufficient or significant appendices attached to this. Happy to go through them or indeed take any questions that councillors may have.
Thank you very much. Have we any questions? The topic that we regularly review in the context of specific decisions. So we move on then. Thank you both for attending on that equalities matter to the Gaelic language plan, which is on page 67.
Thank you. And Council may recall that the Gaelic language plan was previously presented in its draft form to Council in December 2019. This report provides an update or a final Midlothian Council Gaelic language plan for the period 2021 to 2026. It is a report for information, and Council are asked to note the publication of the finalised Gaelic language plan, which was considered and approved by Bord na Gaelic at their meeting in February 2021. Revisions to the delivery timeframe previously set out in the plan considered by the Council in December 2019 as a result of the COVID-19 impact, and the requirement for ongoing monitoring and reporting. Again, the plan has been published on the website in order to meet dates set by Bord na Gaelic, but I'm happy to take any comments or questions councillors may have.
Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Tapali Provost, Ramia Kur Fulcha Enham Show. I do welcome this. I was in East Lothian on Friday and I noticed that they have started changing their signage. They're obviously just a smidgen ahead of us, so I welcome that and I look forward our signage, our dual signage starting. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. And Councillor Alexander.
Yes, I too welcome this paper, and it's very gratifying when you go through Scotland. We were just going through Blair Gowrie the other day and saw the Gaelic signs, and it's wonderful to have our own language celebrated in such a way. And I think that we should celebrate all of the Scottish languages. Lallans, some of the poetry that we have locally is brilliant, and I think that we should celebrate all of our languages because it's part of our culture, and our culture can only be fully appreciated with our own language.
Thank you again. That being the case, I think thank Mara for her contribution and move on to Digital Midlothian, the paper 7.3 at page 73. Dr. Vickers.
Thank you, Provost. So this report is for decision. I'm delighted to present this ambitious digital strategy to Council today. As you know, the ambition of the data-driven innovation workstream of the Edinburgh and South East of Scotland City Deal is to become the data capital of Europe. This new strategy, which we are presenting today, aims to transform the delivery of digital within Midlothian. This ambitious digital strategy was presented to BTSG, and today, on recommendation from BTSG, this report asks Council to, firstly, approve the digital strategy entitled Empowering People, Enabling Growth. Secondly, to invite one member from each political group to sit on a cross-party working group focusing on digital to ensure that members have regular and ongoing updates and are also able to collaborate and inform the wider digital programme. And finally, to invite one member from each political group to sit on a cross-party working group for Place, which will ensure members have regular and ongoing updates and are also able to collaborate and inform the work which is ongoing relating to the key BTSG work streams for Place. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. It's a very short paper, but it's a very important subject. Any contributions from councillors at this stage? Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting framing of words in the paper. It did come from BTSG, but some of the recommendations were around the concerns actually that were expressed at BTSG, both about the kind of pace of this and also about the kind of decision-making role that councillors have or can have in this. And I think there was just a few concerns, but Grace, I just wanted to ask about this, the kind of scale, the cost, etc., and the risk as well. I think we've seen quite a few, high-profile incidents where, whole companies have been unable to access their digital infrastructure, for IT reasons and whatnot. And I also just want to ask about the equalities impact side of this as well. Moving everything so digital will negatively impact some people, and there has to be mitigations put in place for that.
Can I ask Dr. Vickers to comment, and then I think Councillor Winchester had her hand up. Dr. Vickers.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. I think it's important to note that the digital strategy is only one of the pillars in all of the other pillars. So you'll be aware that we're progressing through Derek Oliver's taking the lead on local by default, and this ambition to embed our services at the most local level possible. So I don't think through the strategy we're saying that digital replaces everything else, because human interaction is really important. In terms of the equalities aspect for any project that comes forward, that needs to be very carefully considered. So we have 2 projects that have already been approved. You'll be aware that Council earlier in the year approved the customer service platform, of which equalities was a significant factor in us going out to procure and making sure that that would fit our needs. But also the education project, which is currently undergoing, which Fiona and Colin McCabe are leading on. So they're 2 big projects. I think we've got a real opportunity being linked with the city deal, because we have those relationships with not just other councils within the South East region, but also our universities, further education, but also businesses. So I think from a resilience perspective, it would be good working in partnership with each of those organisations, because absolutely the pace of digital is so quick. You do see companies being impacted by that. We're taking very important steps to make sure that we deliver digital safely. And in fact, the Chief Executive of SEPA is coming to present to our leadership forum later in the week, because we're really keen to learn lessons from companies where maybe they've had to overcome difficulties. I don't think that this is going to be the final strategy we see, and we've labelled this for the next 2 years. Things move so quickly in digital that we're constantly going to need to refresh that. But I'm assured just from the work that we're doing with partners that we're very well placed in the southeast of Scotland to make major strides here. And I do think there's some significant improvements we really need to make to the council's infrastructure for IT.
Thank you. And Councillor Winchester, or perhaps satisfied with that response? The hand has dropped away.
Yes, I was just going to propose someone from the Conservative Party, but I'm not sure whether you're taking sorry, from the Conservative group, I should say.
Yes, we'll come to that.
Right.
In terms of the recommendations, we need a proposer and a seconder.
Happy to move, Provost.
Thank you, Leader. I think distant voice there. Seconder.
I'll second that.
Right, thank you, Councillor Cassidy. Anyone contrary minded? Good. Then we come to the question of establishing who's going to represent each group. If the groups are ready to nominate, Councillor Winchester, I think you had a proposition.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Councillor Leigh Douglas for the Conservative group.
Thank you. Assuming that she's agreeable to that, nominations from other groups. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. I think we want to, for recommendation 2, we want to invite Kelly, and for recommendation 2, we want to recommend Colin. And they can substitute vice versa if necessary.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be substitute for the Conservatives. Councillor Muirhead, I think.
Yeah, just can I move Councillor Curran for the digital cross-party group and Councillor Hackett for the place group.
Thank you very much. Democratic Services, happy with that? That means we can get cracking with this committee right after the summer. Thank you. We then move to item 8.8 and can ask Gary Fairley to talk on the COVID-19 financial update on page 79.
Thanks, Provost. This report is for noting and provides Council with an update on the financial and funding aspects arising from the pandemic in last financial year. Section 4 provides an overview of funding received, and members should note that a significant element of resource was provided towards the end of the year, including just under £5 million of recurring funding from government. Section 5 provides an update on financial flexibilities and the related review of capital accounting. Section 6 then goes on to provide an overview of the additional expenditure and loss of income in the year with details in Appendix 2. Provost, today Council is asked to note the 3 recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Okay, so a report for noting. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Gary. I just wanted to ask about monies that haven't been spent and what exactly we're going to do about that. And I wondered if you knew how much of the allocated social welfare fund that we haven't spent, how much is still outstanding?
So in terms of the first question, Councillor Parry, as I highlighted there, resources were allocated by government quite late in the financial year, and with recognition that those would be used between the last financial year and this. Indeed, for example, things like education recovery funding that covered the summer term that's just finished. We set out in the next report on the agenda the carry forward of grants, etc., and those resources are committed and being used, either already used in the financial year today or committed over the remainder of the year. I'm afraid I don't have the most up-to-date position with the Social Welfare Fund, but I'm happy to pick that up and get back to you separately with an update on the current position.
Provost, can I have a brief supplementary on that? It's my understanding, Gary, that it's around about 60%. And so there's a lot of money that's not being allocated to social welfare funding. Meanwhile, I have constituents getting in touch with me saying, they've been rejected or they can't find the application. Given that we do have a kind of substantial pot of money left, and it's quite likely that if it's not spent, the Scottish Government might come asking for it. Could we be proactive and advertise the social welfare fund for people who are in need, who need it, and we have it?
Gary Fairley.
Happy to take that point on board and make sure that we refresh our advertising of social welfare fund and the conditions that are attached to the award of that, but more than happy to take those points away.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. What about the discretionary fund? I believe there's lots of money in there as well that should be getting filtered down into the community. Can we have a wee bit of explanation on that, please?
Gary Fairley.
Yeah, and perhaps it's better if Derek might be able to give you an update on the discretionary fund that's managed by our colleagues in economic development.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Johnson. So we do have a sum of money that is available from discretionary funding that was allocated. Given the strict eligibility criteria, despite numerous attempts to push this message out to those who are eligible, we did have a sum of money that was still available for disbursement. I took a paper to group leaders earlier this week. We had been given permission from Kate Forbes to alter our eligibility criteria for the discretionary fund, which now allows us to open up to further businesses who have had funding and who are able to demonstrate ongoing hardship through COVID restrictions, through whether it's operations, employability, etc. So by the end of this week, we will have the message out that businesses can apply for this fund, and we will have a 2-week window where we'll invite on a first come first serve basis the opportunity for funding to be disbursed further, and then subsequent to that, should there be any more funding available left within our pot, we'll go back out again. But we have assessed where we are, and given that permission that we do have now to extend eligibility criteria, we're confident that we'll be able to get to businesses that need it most. Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe that's a roughly $750,000 involved in that fund.
Yes, and what we're proposing to do is include, it was a previous paper that we brought to Council recommending that we withdraw £74,000 from the Business Loan Scotland Fund, and we're going to encapsulate that in this project, which will allow us to provide startup grants to businesses who we're trying to help and assist through this time, to be able to have some financial assistance through this period.
So hopefully the smallest enterprises will still be protected under these provisions. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Provost. Could I just ask a follow-on question from that? Is how are we going to contact these businesses? How are we going to let these businesses know that this fund is available? Because I'm a small business. I've never heard of the funds that are there, and I'm a councillor also. So if I'm not hearing about it, I think that's the reason we've got this lag in getting money out to businesses, because there are a lot of small businesses out there that are suffering at the moment.
Yeah, question about our network in economic development, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. Pushing the message through Locate Midlothian website, through our social media platforms, through Business Gateway, through our partners as we work through the Economic Recovery Board, through the Federation of Small Businesses, Chambers of Commerce, etc. That's the method that we have been using. I take on board what Councillor Cassidy says, and we can I would take that we would use our Economic Development and Business Gateway colleagues to make some contact with local businesses to make sure that this message is permeating through the local business base.
Thank you. Can I ask Gary? Gary, we've had many discussions about the inflexibility of the reserves rules under which local authorities operate, and of course it's acute for Midlothian because we have generally very good reserves, but very little general usable reserves. The Scottish Government, I understand, are kicking back on things like the use of capital receipts, and we also have the question of the amortisation of the PPP schools. Has there been any developments on those fronts?
Yeah, so in terms of, I think probably should refer to the financial flexibilities that are detailed in the paper. Although agreement in principle was reached on the service concession contracts, which is the way we account for PPP assets, the flexibility that was originally intended was not secured. That has led to the review of capital accounting that is outlined in the paper, with the expectation that the work on that will then lead to a more positive outcome, that local government will be able to secure the flexibility originally intended, which would be allow us to account within the revenue account for things like PPP assets over the life of the asset rather than the life of the contract. Certainly we'll make sure that we continue to keep members up to date with the developments on that review, which are being reported in through COSLA leaders.
Thank you. The numbers involved could be quite large and change the outlook for this very tight position we've been in for many years on the general reserve, if I understand the position correctly.
Yeah, these are relatively large numbers and large across Scotland. Although I would highlight that it's not additional funding, it simply is accounting for your debt charges on your revenue account over a longer period. So not cash, but an accounting adjustment.
Indeed, the word flexibility, I think, is the right one. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Provost, it was just to touch back on the discretionary fund. It was something that we raised earlier at the leaders' meeting earlier in the week, and Derek came in and gave us a report, and I think it was quite a good, comprehensive report. I think we need to also thank Kate Forbes. I mean, we wrote to Kate some weeks ago. I wrote to Kate just asking for a wee bit of discretion on this. A lot of councils, quite simply, because they struggled to issue the money, just quite simply took a decision just to double up the amount of money they were giving each of the successful applicants, which didn't get the money to the people that needed it most. We've wrote to Kate Forbes. She's obviously taken the time to consider it and came back, and we've got to congratulate her on opening this up to us. This allows us to help a lot of businesses that are still being affected by the pandemic, and it gives the officers in economic development a better hand. I think that some of the points that Colin and Kelly have made today are actually really valid here. We really need to make sure to be getting the message out to people, whether it's for whatever funds it are. If we're holding funds, we really need to proactively try to make sure that we're coupling up with businesses or individual people to make sure that they're aware of the funds and we can help them to try and apply for that. So we did at yesterday's group at the leaders meeting, we did ask for this to be done as timely as possible to try and get the money out to the businesses that are still actually struggling because of restrictions or closures.
Indeed, sir, and there was cross-party agreement on the approach that the council has taken. So can I congratulate the team who worked on this, considerably more granular way of helping the smaller businesses that have not so far benefited, helping them survive. Thank you. That recommendation is to be agreed to the setting aside of 2 million. Can I have a proposal for this decision on 8.9? Proposer.
Happy to propose.
Councillor Parry, and I see Gary Fairley wants to add.
Sorry, Provost.
Yeah.
Provost, you've jumped to recommendations on paper 8.9, but we're still considering 8.8.
Yeah, well, that's good.
You're keen to get out in the sunshine, but
it's the COVID financial update, which is a noting paper. So we move on to 8.9. We've already started to talk about some of the issues on general fund there. So let's jog back. Guy, would you like to speak to 8.9?
Yeah, Provost, this report provides information on the final outturn position for the year to March 21. Points to note, a net underspend in the year of £759,000 against service budgets, and after reflecting the recommendation in the report, a non-earmarked reserve at the year end of 3.8 million. The report itself recommends that £2 million be set aside to help fund the county's continued recovery from the pandemic, together with developing enhanced contingency planning arrangements. And otherwise, today members are asked to note the report. Again, happy to take any questions.
Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, Gary, I see the recommendation there for the £2 million. That's a lot of money, and it didn't seem to be very detailed as to what it would be spent on. So I wonder if you could give me some more details of that.
Yeah, so we're setting aside 2 million, not expecting any more help from the government. Is that the case?
So thanks, Councillor Parry and Provost. Really, the funds are set aside to complement the support we had across the financial years from government, and with an expectation that we'll continue to receive financial support to support services and recovery. Really, at this stage in the pandemic, the idea was to set aside those sums of money, and then alongside that, and indeed we covered it at the corporate incident management team just on Friday for officers to go away and develop detailed delivery plans to ensure that in areas like mental health, for example, that we can actually put that money, deploy that money on the ground to support the county over the coming weeks and months.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, I think there's been a lot of good work done here, and that a lot of the time put into this and the work done by our staff across the council during the pandemic, a lot of uncertainty here as well, and it's quite right probably to set aside money to deal with that. However, I think there's also the bigger question, given some of the changes, some of the additions that have been added in by the Scottish Government. I think it would be really sensible as well, Gary, if we look to bring back a further report on the deliverability of budget agreements that we've got. For once, there's savings in there, for example, on ASN provision, there's savings on cleaning. These are targets that we're quite simply not going to get anymore. So I think it would make sense to actually bring back a report for officers on what are the budget savings that we've filed in are going to be achieved and what aren't they, and what we're going to replace them with. So I think a wider report being brought back would be helpful as well.
So that would kind of tie up with the MTFS?
Yeah.
Councillor Parry quickly, and then perhaps back to Gary Fairley.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on that because I just didn't feel like it was a fulsome answer. And, you know, just kind of taking £2 million out the bank, if you like, and, you know, handing it over in a blank cheque just doesn't sit quite comfortably with me. I completely agree that, you know, we should invest in our recovery, but, you know, with the same respect, I know that I need to buy Christmas presents, but I'm not going to take, you know, £2 million out the bank right now to do that. So I just would like a little bit more detail about what those budgets are going to be allocated to, because I wasn't reassured by Gary's answer, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Parry. You're somewhat talking my language. I'm just wondering if we're earmarking this or actually ring-fencing it. So if we discovered that we couldn't logically deploy it for COVID-related problems, it would flow back into the general reserve. The last thing we want is any more inflexibility as to the use of our reserves. Perhaps, Gary, if you could comment on those three contributions.
Yes, thanks again, Provost. The idea was not to create any inflexibility, and I accept the points that have been made. I think perhaps as a way forward might suggest that as we develop those plans, that we would then bring them through group leaders for visibility around the plans and how those resources will be deployed on the ground. The position, I suppose, reflects the continued development of where we are in terms of the pandemic's life cycle, and as we all look towards the recovery phase and a return to normal in terms of the health and public health restrictions, that we can then turn our attention to that recovery phase, but also looking ahead around how we ensure that there are enhanced arrangements for should there be a reoccurrence of the pandemic or other sort of pandemics or health issues that might arise in the future.
Okay, so it's earmarked, and we're to have further detail as the year unfolds. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, just going back to what Councillor Parry said, why are we taking money out of the reserves at the moment to go into something that isn't fully accounted for? Surely when we can fully account for those requirements, that we can go back to the general reserve, come to council and get the money then. I just don't understand why we would do it now.
Gary Fairley.
Yes, thanks, Provost. The plan and the recommendation is to set that money aside, which would then allow officers to go ahead and do the planning we've talked about, rather than doing it the other way around, to do the planning and then find that there's no agreement in principle to set aside the funds or to provide the funds. And again, it recognises where we are in terms of further the uncertainty around further support as we go through the year. around a number of pressures, particularly in terms of the pandemic, in terms of additional support that we might or might not receive from government as the year unfolds. So it was really to get agreement in principle to set those funds aside, and as I say, officers will develop the proposals and we can bring them back through group leaders. So it's an earmarking, and there will be as much scrutiny of this earmark 2 million as there would be as if it was coming from the general fund. Is that what I'm hearing? Absolutely, yes. I think that echoes Councillor Milligan's comments. That being the case, do I have Councillor Muirhead?
Thanks, Provost. Could I just emphasise Councillor Milligan's proposal here? If you recall, last year we did have a review of the deliverability of budgets early on, and I think that work was reported back to us in February. And I think Councillor Milligan specifically moving an amendment here to the recommendations to call for that similar review. So I think it's important that we agree that here today, and that that review of the delivery budgets get undertaken and reported back as part of the next financial monitoring report. I think that's the way we would want to deal with that. And absolutely, it's important that we continue to monitor the performance of the budget as we move forward towards the end of the financial year.
Okay, I take that as an amendment to the recommendations. A new little b, I think Democratic Services will pick that up. So otherwise, note the contents of this report falls to little c. And I would certainly support that because I think it reflects the discussion we've just had. Councillor Parry.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to prolong this much further. Just to say that I'm still a wee bit uncomfortable about the governance arrangements of this, and I don't think that there's a way that, or certainly that I've heard, that I as a councillor can follow this £2 million blank cheque. And I just don't feel comfortable with that at all. So I think I don't want to hold up the work on this, but I do want another look at the governance, how this money is spent, and how councillors are involved with this, because I do not want to get, a few months down the line and realise that we've spent, £1 million on something that, we as councillors knew wasn't the right thing for our communities. And I think that recently we've been in that situation as councillors far too often. So I think there needs to be further assurances around that, Provost.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, but I think Councillor Muirhead and Councillor Milligan have covered that point, perhaps not as thoroughly as you would want. Councillor Alexander.
No, I don't feel comfortable with it, even with the further recommendations by Councillor Muirhead and Councillor Milligan. And I would second Councillor Parry's proposal to just to make it more democratic. I think we're losing the democracy of this if we allow it to go through the way it is.
Yeah, I think essentially your position is not to accept little a, the set-aside part of this. So effectively voting against the motion as amended by Councillors Muirhead and Milligan. Councillor Hackett.
I'll stand to be corrected, but if I'm right, lots of discussions around our budgets happen at the Business Transformation Steering Group. There's group leaders. There's been lots of reviews of the budgets given the impact of COVID. And if I heard Derek correctly, this is about the additional cost of COVID, but also the decisions that were not met, that were made by this council. So the potential ongoing costs of those longer term savings not being adapted. So that approach seems eminently sensible to me. How we then do that, as I say, if it's through BTSG and group leaders, that seems to me to be a similar way to how most of our budget discussions happen before they come back to full council. So could someone correct me if I'm wrong in what Derek and Jim are proposing, or is that any different to how we've been doing things of late? Thank you.
Well, I think we're coming to a point where we have to form a view, and I sense that Councillors Alexander and Parry really don't want any even earmarking. When we clearly know that there are areas of the MTFS we're not going to make, and we also know that there are COVID-related things going to happen. I think their problem is putting an artificial number around it is a problem to them. On the other hand, we have the emendation to this original paper by Councillors Muirhead and Milligan, indicating that there will be the usual full analysis of the way in which the £2 million is spent. So there are two separate positions. Can I crystallise the Milligan-Muirhead position as the initial proposition, and the Parry-Alexander one as the counter proposition? Can we perhaps move to a vote on this? Is Democratic Services happy with that? Councillor Parry, perhaps not. Can I therefore ask for a roll call to all those councillors who support the Milligan-Muirhead position? That is, the recommendations are set out, but with the addition of the review of the projects will be brought back as soon as possible to Council, following consideration in all the relevant other bodies such as BTSG. Democratic Services, do you want to do a roll call?
Yes, Provost. Councillor Alexander.
I move to take out section E.
Councillor Cassidy.
Remove section A.
Councillor Curran.
Yeah, the amendment by Councillor Milligan and Muirhead.
Councillor Hackett.
Can I just check away the amendment for the motion?
We'll take the amendment is the Milligan-Muirhead position.
The amendment, thank you.
Councillor Hardy.
To remove section A.
Councillor Imrie.
The Milligan-Muirhead amendment.
Councillor Johnston.
Remove section A.
Councillor Leigh Douglas.
Amendment.
Councillor McCall.
Remove section A.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Remove section A.
Councillor Milligan.
Amendment.
Councillor Muirhead.
The amendment.
Councillor Monroe.
Remove section A, please.
Councillor Parry.
The motion, which is to remove section A.
Councillor Russell.
For the amendment.
Councillor Smale.
For the amendment.
Councillor Wallace.
Remove recommendation A.
Councillor Winchester.
For the amendment.
It's 9 for each.
Casting vote is for the amendment. Democratic Services happy they've got the new little b documented.
Yes.
Which provides
thanks.
for reporting back to the council.
Yes, thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Move on to item 8.10 on page 112, the housing revenue account. Gary Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. Again, this report is for noting today, and the report sets out the HRA position at the year end, with section 2 providing a summary of the financial performance for the year. It sets out the position with the capital investment, which was 15.6 million, the underspend on the revenue account, which was mainly as a result of the impact of COVID on our investment plans, and the position with the year end, with the reserve at the year end. Again, today Council is asked to note the report.
Any questions from councillors? Very agreeable to note the level of the balances. Thank you very much for the work on that. We move to the more difficult area of the General Services Capital Plan, 8.11.
Excuse me, Provost, I do have a question.
Yes.
And it's possibly something I should have inquired about earlier. It's the McNeil roof repair. Could I have some explanation on that, please?
Gary Fairley, possibly Simon Bain if he's around, which I think he is. Gary.
Yes, Provost, I'm happy to defer to colleagues. I see Kevin is on the screen, and perhaps he can give you an update. He's himself or Simon would be more familiar with the progress on the works.
McNeill Terrace, Kevin.
Thank you, Provost. Certainly, Councillor Johnson, this follows a major fire incident at McNeill Terrace. Certainly, we made ward councillors aware of that at the time of the episode, and clearly in terms of our response was about vacating that building in its entirety, as it needed and still has requirement of a full roof rebuild. So clearly this work has taken some time and is an insurance claim in that respect. I don't have a dateline for the completion of those works yet, but we can come back to you offline in that regard. Thank you.
That's lovely, thank you. But I see that within, or maybe the money comes from different areas, the families or the households who needed to be moved elsewhere, surely that had an impact on the house and revenue account to help them resettle in their new tenancies, etc. I didn't see anywhere that was listed, so wondered if that was included in the whole roof repair expense.
It's not in terms of this expenditure, because that's the capital element and that would have been met through our revenue. So I can come to you with the separate costings for that, because as you say, we did facilitate relocation of the families and meet their particular needs, which varied across the 6 households accommodated in that block. But I can bring you that number separately offline.
Thank you.
Thank you. The report is duly noted. Item 8.11 on page 122, the General Services Capital Plan. Gary again.
Yes, thanks, Provost. This report presents the outturn for the General Services Capital Plan for the year just ended. Section 3.1 sets out new projects for endorsement in the plan, with Section 3.2 setting out changes to the plan in respect of the phasing of expenditure, with actual investment in our asset base for the year totalling £25.6 million. After applying the funding that was received through various sources, it resulted in a net borrowing requirement to fund the plan of just under £10 million. 3.6 goes on to provide an update on the capital fund, and today members are asked to agree the 2 recommendations which are set out in the report.
Comments from councillors? There being none, could I have a proposer for the recommendations and a seconder?
I'll move the recommendations, Provost.
Thank you, Leader. And Councillor Hardy seconding. Is there anyone contrary minded? On that basis, we've agreed the position as set out and move on to 8.12, the annual Treasury Management Report. Gary.
Yes, again, Provost, this report is for noting. A member should also note that it was considered in draft by Audit Committee on the 22nd of June. Its purpose is to inform members of the Treasury management activity for the year and the position at the year end. Some points to note, the report highlights that Midlothian continues to be a top performer in this critical aspect of financial management activity, and that compared with average performance, we've quantified the savings as £1.8 million per annum. We entered into one long-term loan with the Public Works Loan Board during the year, and that was for a tenure of 46.5 years at a rate of 1.17%, which just reinforces the long-term nature of Treasury management activity for the Council. The overall borrowing requirement at the year end was £293 million. That was the borrowing requirement required to fund the overall investment in our asset base. And we have a large forward borrowing requirement to meet the needs of a growing population. At the year end, our long-term borrowing secured was £275 million, which resulted in an £18 million under borrowed position, i.e. we've not secured the full long-term borrowing required to fund investment, rather we're using temporary surplus funds to fund part of that. And finally, Provost, in considering the report, the Audit Committee referenced the inherent link to the previous report, the General Services and HRA capital programmes, which in turn determine the capital financing requirement for the council. Provost, today, councillors simply asked to note this report. Thank you.
Thank you. There's obviously been extensive discussions at Audit Committee. Any contributions from the floor? That being the case, we note the report as requested and move to 8.13.
Provost, this Treasury Management briefing on the 21st of June addressed this report, which you'll note is actually from EY rather than a council report. So in terms of governance, it's been submitted here for noting and been circulated previously to all members prior to that briefing, and of course to members of the Audit Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. This includes a new checklist which will help improve our assessment of counterparties or other local authorities. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you very much. The briefing, these briefings for the finance, etc., are very important to me, and it was extremely disappointing to note that just an hour or so beforehand, the meeting and the briefing seminar was rescheduled for another time, meaning many of my party colleagues couldn't go to. We're very disappointed, and we want to Democratic Services and the Chief Exec to note that that's unacceptable moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. That point was also forcibly made at the Audit Committee and will be carried forward. Kevin Anderson.
I'll defer to the Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Given that this was EY's report, there was an unfortunate incident which meant that they had to change the time. They did present it within the block of time that was first attributed for members to attend. Stephen Reid had also offered to be available to brief groups. We offered that out to the SNP group. That offer still stands, Kath. So if you would like some time with Stephen Reid, I'm sure that we would be able to set that up for you.
Thank you. And that being the case, we note the report and move on to 8.14, page 133. Kevin, I think. Yes, Kevin Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Provost. This report introduces the revised tenant participation and customer engagement strategy for 2021 through to 24. And whilst it is a statutory requirement, the Council has readily met its obligations for service user involvement and consultation and participation regularly, which is undertaken through our service change and policy developments. This strategy reflects that the methods of our engagement have adapted to circumstances of the COVID pandemic in the past year, while opportunities were provided in the review of the housing allocation policy and latterly the local housing strategy. As a responsible landlord, we support and resource our active participation as detailed in the strategy in achieving the outcomes for promotion, participation and performance for our customers. Provost, it's recommended that Council approves this strategy and its publication. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments from the floor. Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost. Just to move the recommendations and to acknowledge the consultation work that we have managed to undertake throughout the COVID restrictions. That work varies from, estate walkabouts, tenant participation panels, mindful courses to support tenants with mental well-being, IT training to support tenants to get digitally connected, just so we can connect with our tenants and listen to our tenants. And I know this was well received as well, so I'll just move the recommendation, Provost.
Thank you. And a seconder for Councillor Curran. I'm sure there must be someone there whose life will be fulfilled by seconding this motion. Councillor Hackett. Thank you very much indeed. Item 8.15 is the voluntary sector grants. Could I hear from Joan Trement?
So Council is asked to make a decision on how the allocation of voluntary sector grants for 2022 to 2025 are approved. The scoring panel who will assess and recommend allocations consists of council officers, cross-party group of elected members and third sector representatives. And the two options proposed for approving grants are A, to delegate responsibility for approving allocations to this subgroup with a report to Council for noting, or a report with recommendation from this subgroup submitted to Council for approval. So, happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. So we're having to make a decision. The precedent strikes me as currently more A than B. Is that correct? So just asking what the status quo is in terms of this type of grant giving. Is Joan still online?
Yep. Yes. I mean, obviously, you know, we have the elected members, council officers and third sector there. So if council were mindful in relation to allowing them to have the delegated responsibility to approve the allocation, given that they look at all the applications, etc. It's a cross-party group, and then bring back to council for noting. But obviously we've had discussions with cross-party and they've asked that we bring this report because there wasn't an agreement there. So the second option is obviously the recommendations for the subgroup to submit to council for approval, bearing in mind that certain members will need to obviously leave the arena in relation to if they have a vested interest within any of the reports that are going to be submitted, which is probably quite a high likelihood of that, Provost.
I think that's the nub of the question. Thank you very much for explaining that. Councillor Curran.
Apologies, Provost, that's a legacy hand.
Councillor Hackett.
Thank you, Provost. I just thought as one of the councillors involved with the poverty grant funding process. If you remember, the funding was undersubscribed and we had some debate discussion here, and that's where councillors volunteered themselves to get involved as part of that process. And I wouldn't dare speak for Diane and Janet, but I thoroughly enjoyed myself. It felt like they did as well. It was a really good process. We were able to bring local knowledge to the applications when we were able to identify where community groups could be working closer together. So certainly as an elected member, I thought we brought a lot to the process and also took a lot out of it as well in terms of learning about the organisations and how they operate in our local community. I would recommend that we take A, because in that sense, we as elected members are represented if we choose to go down that model of scrutinising the applications, and it would allow, if you like, a quick decision-making process to happen and the grants to be awarded. In my experience, I can't think of a time where a group similar to this has gone away and looked at applications and come back and had them refused by the council. Obviously, lots of questions, because I think there's some funding arrangements different to this one that have raised eyebrows in the past. But I don't see that being the case with these applications. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take you as a proposer of option A. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, our group had a conversation about this, but we think that option B would be the best thing in terms of making sure that there was a good level of engagement from all councillors. So that would be our proposal. And secondly, I just wanted to add, in terms of grants in general, I keep asking at council meetings around progress on participatory budgeting, and I think there's even been a report proposed at one point. And I just wondered if Joan could let me know where that's got to, and whether we could have a report back to our next council meeting around where we are in terms of our progress.
Yeah, question there for Joan on participatory budgeting. Joan, are you able to comment?
Yeah, Councillor Parry, you have mentioned it before, and yet we are hoping to progress it. Alistair Mathers has left, and at this moment in time we've not fulfilled his role, and he did lead on participatory budgeting. So I'm in the midst of looking at how we're going to replace him, and so I'm doing a mini review within the service, and I've made a proposal, and I'm just waiting to find out job evaluation in relation to how we're going to take that forward. But I do accept that it is outstanding at this moment in time. It's not something that we've forgotten about, but it is something that we are pursuing, and there is some work being done in the background. So I will endeavour to bring a report back to the next council, and the hope that once we have our our new landscape measured out in relation to who's going to fulfil these duties going forward.
Thank you. And Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here with Kelly on this one, and we want it to be B because, as Joan acknowledged, on numerous occasions, the cross-party working group councillors will have to bail out, and so therefore it won't be representative. And I think that in all respects, B is the way forward. Thank you.
Okay, that's thank you for the clarity of that position. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, I'm neither here nor there as to how we deal with this, because I think there's massive obstacles either way, because if we bring it back to full council, we're going to spend as much time with elected members, many of whom earlier on were talking about some of the groups that volunteer. We're going to be sitting there putting their hand up saying, I can't take any part, I'm going to have to bail out the door. But the reality is, I think having a representation for each of the political parties at the subgroup is probably the easiest and best way to deal with this. One of the points that I do want to make is, and it was made to us some 3 years ago when we allocated this, a lot of the groups that were unsuccessful were making the point that the third sector groups that were represented also had applications into this. And it wasn't seen as being really fair. So I think we really need to make sure whoever the independents are, that they're truly independent and there's no party or group that has an application in at that time, because it was something that went down really wrongly with the groups who were unsuccessful.
So we have this problem of connectivity, whatever level we choose to operate at, but obviously the council would be very much in the public eye. Councillor Hackett, Councillor Johnson.
And just on the back of what Derek's saying, I'm not particularly fussed. I thought A would have got us a quicker decision-making process. It would have prevented half the council having to recuse itself of having that final oversight. So on that basis, I'll withdraw the motion and just leave it open to whatever comes forward in terms of option A or B. Thank you.
Well, except we do have to have a proposer, I think. No, Councillor Leigh Douglas.
Thanks, Provost. Sorry, I was about to support John on A, to be honest, because just to confirm that, yes, I did enjoy it, John. It was actually quite a lot of hard work, and I think there was an awful lot of scrutiny done by such a small group. So yeah, I would have supported you on A, but again, you know, I'm happy to go with the general feedback. But I do think that's what, and I would say I think Diane was part of the group as well, and it would be interesting to hear what she said, because I think we all felt it was a really great exercise and it was really scrutinised.
It's your lucky day. Diane's hands, next one up. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, it was an enjoyable experience. It was really hard work. We put an awful lot of effort into it, and I think we were quite fair in what we did. But I am quite happy to put this forward in front of council as well, just for that extra scrutiny, so that, you know, people can't come back and say, well, it was done behind closed doors or whatever. So I would recommend B, just for total transparency.
Thank you very much. Councillor Winchester.
Thanks, Provost. Just a question. If we opt for option B, would the officers then make a decision and then come back to us? At the moment, we have councillors. If we go for option A, we have councillors involved in looking at the every single application and making involved in making the decisions. But I just wonder how B would happen if the decision had been would be made prior to it coming.
Yeah, in my understanding, there would be a recommendation list which we have to give the final say-so to. And the problem is if the council decides to give rather more to one group and actually reduce the funding of another, because it is a fixed pot. I wonder if we could have some comments from Joan on just the mechanics of option B.
Well, I would agree with yourself, Provost. My understanding would be is that the panel, the multi-agency panel, would go through all the applications and assess who got the highest score in relation to meeting the criteria for the grant, and then put that proposal forward to council for approval. I wouldn't be expecting everyone to be going through every single application because, as the three councillors have already alluded to, this is a huge exercise and very, very time consuming, so we need to trust the group that we've given that power to in relation to bringing forward the ones that meet the criteria and have the highest scores with the recommendations.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, Councillor Alexander, possibly a legacy hand? Possibly on mute? It's a legacy hand. Councillor Winchester, possibly a legacy hand on mute. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, I think what we're being asked here today is to actually have a subgroup that would involve elected members. It's just what power that subgroup has. And it's whether they have a binding decision or whether a recommendation. It looks like people are happy with the for it to be a recommendatory. I'll try that again. A body that recommends to council rather than actually bound. So I'm quite happy with that, and I'm quite happy to move Councillor Hackett again as a Labour group rep on that if we're looking for representatives that are going to be sitting on that body.
Okay, well, it sounds like this A or B is, something on which good people might slightly differ. But if Councillor Hackett's not proposing A, then by default, I think we end up with B. But if Councillor Hackett wants to push for A, then we will have a roll call.
I think I'll avoid that situation. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, do I take it? Councillor Milligan, hands up. Hands still up.
Sorry, Provost, I'm trying to get it done.
Yeah, but we've all had that problem. I think by virtue of discussion, it's going to be quite difficult to change the recommendations because, as I say, if you want to boost your favourite charity, A, you've got to leave the room, and B, even if that happens, some other charity would have to, or perhaps a number of charities would have to have lesser funding, and that's also going to be an emotional thing to do. But it is the responsibility of the councillors, so I think B is therefore adopted as our policy. I hope Democratic Services are in agreement with that. And I hope, John Trinent, are you happy with that decision?
Thank you, Provost. Yep.
Very good. Okie dokie. Thank you all very much indeed. So we move to 8.16, the denominational review in relation to the St Margaret's Roman Catholic Primary School, the consultation. Can I ask for Fiona to speak to this?
Good afternoon, Provost. So this report is for a decision, and the purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update on the strategies undertaken to improve the staffing situation and in turn the longer term future of our denominational schools. So Council is asked to approve two recommendations and consider two recommendations. Firstly, that the Council retain 6 denominational primary schools and 1 denominational secondary school, and secondly, authorise the Executive Director to undertake a statutory consultation on a proposal to close St Margaret's Roman Catholic Primary School. Section 3 of the report sets out the various statutory duties that are placed on the Council and the Education Service in relation to the provision of education and also securing best value. Best value relates to securing both the quality of education in line with the revised Standards in Schools Act and also the duty to maintain an appropriate balance between quality and cost. Elected members will be aware that the review was due to concerns relating to the availability of teachers with the relevant approval to teach in Roman Catholic schools, and also the inability to attract suitably qualified candidates to senior leadership posts within our denominational schools. And last March, the service was due to carry out informal consultations with staff, parents, pupils and the wider community on a proposal that had been developed in partnership with head teachers. Unfortunately, due to the impact of the pandemic, we paused going out to consultation, but remained steadfast in our objective to stabilise and strengthen Roman Catholic provision. A sustained effort to employ a greater number of teachers with the necessary approval, alongside setting the intake capacity within our Roman Catholic primary schools, is having a positive impact, and we're now anticipating that 67% of the class teachers will have the appropriate level of approval. The Education Service is also recruiting to an Education Support Officer post to support recruitment not just in our denominational schools but to all our schools as part of a revised workforce planning strategy. And it is important to note that the staffing position in our denominational schools remains a challenge, and that this is a national issue which requires to be addressed not just by Midlothian Council. Council will also wish to note the significant capital investment, both recent and planned, in the denominational school estate. Whilst many families across the county have been aware of the denominational review, our denominational schools remain a positive option, and we've seen increases in some of the school roles, including those proposed as possible closures. However, one denominational primary role continues to fall, and the numbers due to attend St Margaret's Roman Catholic Primary School in August are extremely low, with the possibility of 6 pupils attending, with less than half being baptised Roman Catholic. St Margaret's Primary School is currently led by a leader of learning who's also the head teacher of Loanhead Primary School. In June 2021, senior officers held virtual meetings with St Margaret's Roman Catholic Primary School and representatives of the Catholic Church and the Parent Council. And it was to share our concerns about the school's viability and our intention to propose to Council that we undertake a statutory consultation on the future of the school. The Education Service is of the view that the very small numbers of children attending, and in taking into account that very few children are baptised Roman Catholic, that they will benefit from a wider range and breadth of learning experiences available to them within other learning environments and within a wider peer group at their age and stage. So in summary, Council was asked to approve 2 recommendations: that we retain 6 denominational primary schools and 1 secondary school, and these schools will be reviewed as part of the service area's ongoing learning estate and staffing review processes, and to agree to a formal statutory consultation on the proposal to close St Margaret's Roman Catholic Primary School. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. Before we proceed to councillor contributions, we have a contribution from Vic Vaughan, who's unable to be with us today, which he sent to the leader and myself, and I'll read out just a section of it. This obviously Vic is the Roman Catholic representative in the council. He says, "I'm very pleased the council has committed to 6 denominational primary schools and 1 denominational secondary school. I'm further encouraged by the past and future new builds, refurbishments and extensions which will allow for a dynamic future for our denominational schools. Midlothian Council is clearly committed to its denominational schools. The situation at St Margaret's Primary School is disappointing. The reductions in the role of this school over a number of years has, in my opinion, made this decision inevitable. A school with 1 class and perhaps less than 10 pupils is simply not an option. I'm pleased to learn that there's been considerable consultation with the school community. In summary, I believe these decisions will lead to a sustainable future for our denominational schools, and I would wish to indicate my strong support for them." In addition, we had a letter from Archbishop Cushley, who is similarly very appreciative of the work that's been done by the Education Department of Midlothian. He says, however, he's concerned about the impact the current review might have on the future of St Margaret's Primary School and the community the school serves, knowing very well that there is always the need to provide good Catholic education for communities that request it. He therefore hopes for a positive outcome for this review process. As you point out, Fiona, there is, of course, this next step, statutory consultation. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing I would like to say, and reiterating many of the comments that we've just heard, is that I'm pleased that we will be retaining so many of our denominational schools. However, I just feel like this whole exercise has been detrimental to the future of our denominational schools. I think there's been damage and harm to that and to their sustainability by having the constant threat of closure on them, and this being the 2nd primary school in my ward that's due to close. I know what that feels like to go through with the community, and it's not great. And you know, I think over the years we've seen the roll in St Margaret's fallen because of this exact reason. Denominational review has been hanging over them. I do wonder how much money it's cost to have this whole denominational review, and then for there to basically not be very much outcome other than yet another primary school in my ward closing. So I just can't support the recommendation to close St Margaret's and yet another primary school in my ward closing. So I won't be voting for that recommendation today, Provost. Yes, I mean, the recommendation is that we hold a consultation. I think that's strictly the case, is it not, Fiona? Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to the final decision, I will, you know, if that's what the consultation says, then I absolutely respect that. But I just think that this was an avoidable situation, that St Margaret's did have the potential to be a sustainable school. And I just feel like the strategy has been to run the school down. So for that reason, I can't in good faith do that. But I will absolutely respect the views of the consultation and hope to be helpful during that process. Thank you for that. Councillor Muirhead.
Thanks, Provost. I understand the point that Councillor Parry's making about, you know, the concern that has been expressed by parents when we've been trying to move forward. To bear in mind, it was a pre-consultation exercise with parents across the community or denominational schools. It's really difficult to have any kind of initial conversation on anything like this without alarming people to some extent, way before you've got to a situation where you're coming even close to making a decision. But I think what we're doing here is the right way forward. Our key aim has to be to stabilise and strengthen denominational education across Midlothian. There have been a number of delays in progress in the review. Mostly because of the impact of COVID, and you know, the delays have resulted in officers being able to try to improve one of the most difficult problems that the denominational schools face, and that's attracting and retaining staff. Actions taken by the current management teams, as Fiona has said, has improved the situation by increasing the percentage of staff with church approval from 50 to eventually 67%. With further actions being taken, again, as Fiona indicated, to improve things further. There's no longer any temporary shared headships arrangements in place, but there's still temporary leaderly learning and leadership arrangements at 3 of our primary schools, Roman Catholic primary schools. But we now intend to move to permanent leadership appointments at St Andrews and St Luke's Primary. There isn't any doubt that while there's been an improvement, as Fiona says again, like most areas in Scotland, we continue to face difficulties in recruiting and retaining staff in our denominational schools. And I would hope that the Scottish Government would be able to do its part in ensuring that a fair percentage of the 1,000 additional teachers that they've committed to would have Roman Catholic approval. The situation in St Margaret's, while part of the denominational review, I think is a different situation. The number at this school has been falling for some time, and it's become apparent that numbers will fall to a level in August, which might be as low as 6. We therefore believe that the small number of children attending St Margaret's Primary School will benefit more from a wider range and breadth of learning experience available to them within other learning environments within a wider peer group. And unfortunately, that means it's necessary to authorise the Executive Director to undertake statutory consultation on the proposals to permanently discontinue the provision of primary education in St Margaret's Primary School and to adjust the catchment areas as required. And I would like to therefore move the recommendations on the paper in front of us today, which will result in the Council retaining 6 denominational primary schools and 1 denominational secondary school as part of the learning estate.
Thank you, Jim, for that. Councillor Hackett and then Councillor Leigh-Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. I've got mixed views about this report, but I do welcome as ward member that had St Luke's Primary School in there. When we started this process, all of the options other than status quo resulted in St Luke's closing, and I did share the parents and pupils' frustrations that if you were going to do a full options appraisal, that, you know, at least the opening of that one school should have been featured somewhere along the line. So as a ward member, I think, you know, the parents at St Luke's will be very pleased to hear that their school's staying open, particularly in light of work that's going on around the joint campus. So there's, you know, the possibility there that we're going to have not just the school staying, but it will be in a new, hopefully shiny, all singing, all dancing building, which I know will be warmly received. I did press as a ward member that whatever happened to St Luke's, that the St Luke's identity and community would have had to have been retained. So some effort by the council to make sure there was a link there with the local parish, no matter where those children ended up. But we don't have to go down that route at this moment. And I mean, I think this review causing damage, I think, is probably overstated, but it has definitely caused hurt. You know, I recognise that there are parents really quite upset by this process. But when we look at the issues there, I reflect on, I moved to Scotland in 2005. One of the first person I met was a non-Catholic teacher who taught at a Catholic school. And she was explaining to me back then all the problems with staffing. So, you know, and I took the way the conversation went that had been an issue for decades. So we're probably looking at staffing issues in Catholic schools going back 2, 3, possibly 4 decades. So it's not an issue that we can resolve on our own here in Midlothian. It's really pleasing to see the effort that Fiona and her team has made in progressing recruitment and getting new teachers to come out here. But as Councillor Muir had referenced, you know, there's a national program going on around recruiting new teachers. If we as a country believe that Catholic education has a future in the public sector, we all have a joint responsibility to make sure that that's as successful as possible. What the end of this review does is says that Midlothian will do that, and it's how do we work with everyone else, the church, the government and others, to make sure that that happens, not just for this next few years, but well above and beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I take it you want to second Councillor Muirhead's motion? Thank you. Councillor Leigh Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I was just about to second Jim's proposal there. Yeah, I just wanted to just touch on quickly, maybe ask Fiona this, that is there any other school role being affected by the process, have fallen, sorry?
In terms of the schools that were identified as potentially being proposed as closures, St Matthew's, no, the role is very healthy, and St Luke's similarly so. So the only school that continues to decline is St Margaret's. So other schools that were also being highlighted as potentially being proposed as closures haven't seen that same decrease in the school role.
And Councillor Imrie, then Councillor McCall.
Thanks very much, Provost. I think it's a particularly sad day for any council that has a report up that says that we've got to look at going down to a statutory consultation regarding any of our schools, never mind the St Margaret's. But to be perfectly honest, the problem didn't start with a denominational review. It started way before that, and I was involved. I can't remember, 2008, 2009, and the school hadn't been open that long. And don't forget, Provost, it was built as a four-class school at that time, and to this day, no more than 2 classes were ever occupied with pupils. Now, I fought alongside the Parents' Council, along with the Catholic Church, to get them to redefine their boundaries and religious boundaries, and look to get the South Edinburgh part of the religious area that they have, and I'm struggling to remember the name of what they call it, but they have certain locations that they're allowed to go into, and I tried to get that agreed, and we did get it agreed, and we actually put the word out to pupils from South Edinburgh that to invite them to come to St Margaret's. The reality was, I think we got one family that decided to send the kids there, and the rest voted with their feet and went somewhere else. So this has been an ongoing situation, and only 4 or 5 years ago, before we even spoke about denominational reviews, the numbers were going down again then, and we were down to one class in actual fact at one point in time, with the head teacher at that time hoping that she could attract other pupils to the school. So it's not a new thing. Yes, the denominational review may have had an impact, but when you look at the other schools within that review, strangely, they haven't been impacted to the same extent. So if you take it out the denominational review, what we're looking at, Provost, is a school that doesn't have a role that's sustainable, and unfortunately, and it really is choking this, we're going to have to go down the statutory consultation route. There's no getting away from that. Now, whatever that outcome is going to be, who knows? But I think the reality check is when you get the church and the religious rep that sits on this council all accepting the reality and the situation, then to be perfectly honest, I think we have got to go along with that. And I understand what Councillor Parry's saying. You know, she doesn't want that to happen, and nobody does. But the reality is that we cannot justify the numbers that are going to be there and trying to give the form of all-rounded education that we pride ourselves in doing in Midlothian. So therefore, I will be supporting the next stage, and that is to go to statutory consultation. Thanks very much indeed, Provost.
Thank you. I think the representations from Vic Bourne and from the Archbishop were actually more subtle than that, and they do have a concern for St Margaret's. So we need to have a very proper consultation, and also take into account the enormous amount of house building in Lonehead, and yet that doesn't seem to have had any effect on the rule. I find that strange. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. I have a question and also a comment. I think, Fiona, you said that we count people who are Catholic as those who were baptised when they enrol at the school. Is that correct? Do you take into account anyone who may have then been, who because they're attending a Catholic church then decide to get baptised into the faith?
Very much. What we did in terms of providing this update is we checked with each of the head teachers how many of the children in the school on the school roll were of the Catholic faith. So we did obviously ask in terms of whether that was coming in at P1, and as you know, St Margaret's hasn't had any new P1s in. So we did ask in terms of who was still attending the school that was of the Catholic faith. Because you are quite right, we could have children moving into the area, and it's not necessarily when they join the school.
Yeah, and also I know of children who have subsequently been baptised after joining a faith school. I think the comment that I would make is, I think it's really sad that we're in a situation with St Margaret's that we've been in Glencorse. And I don't want to go over old ground again. I was there on Friday when it closed, and it was really sad. But I do worry about rumours going around that, oh, this school's closing, this school's closing, and that we end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I have real concerns, and again, all the building that's going on in Pennycook and Auchendinny, as you know, Sacred Heart can only take so many children. So my concern, I have real concerns about this, and I can't support this paper. Thank you.
Yes, and as stated, we're not voting to close the school, but to have the statutory consultation. I realise that this is a time for you to voice your opinion on that. Councillor Parry and Councillor Johnston.
Thanks, Provost. I don't want to misrepresent the religious rep statement. I don't want to accuse Councillor Imrie of misrepresenting it either, but I think he possibly did. It would have been nicer if they had been appendixes in our paper, and so I just wanted to ask if they could be minuted like that, because I think they are incredibly important, and I didn't find comfort with what they said. I agreed that that it was a shame that we had got in this situation at all.
Yes, I think they should definitely be part of the consultation considerations, and they represent, as far as we know, the current position of the hierarchy. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Provost. As part of the consultation, when you're speaking to parents, they're obviously going to be asking, if this school closes, where will my child go? So does that mean eventually will we lead on to new catchment areas for the schools, so that there's not, as Debbie alluded to, too many in one school and no enough in another? How are we going to manage that situation? Because that's the unintended consequence. We just get into a bigger muddle somewhere else.
So, within the paper, we've highlighted that the catchment areas would change to be Sacred Heart and St Mary's. So we've worked out the distances to both schools, and a number of children in the area already attend Sacred Heart or St Mary's. And I know that a number of children have been moving to either of those schools, or in fact, some of the movement, to be fair, has not been movement to another denominational school. Some of them have been because of actual house moves, family circumstances, and some others have been because they've moved within Midlothian, and because they weren't of the Catholic faith, they're now attending a non-denominational school elsewhere in Midlothian. So the reason for the recent moves, it varies considerably in terms of individual family circumstances. But in relation to your question, yes, the catchment areas of Sacred Heart and St Mary's would be amended to reflect the change if the proposal was approved at Council to close St Margaret's Primary School after the consultation period.
Thank you. Councillor Winchester.
Thank you, Provost. Fiona, just one quick question. With all the house building in the area, I think Midlothian West is being built on in every spare piece of land at the moment. With Catholic schools' roles, are those of the Catholic faith given priority to attend Catholic schools?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Hackett, and then perhaps we can move to a resolution on this.
Not to throw you a curveball, Fiona, you might not have this detail, but you know, we have seen our population grow quite significantly here in Midlothian over the last decade. And I'm just wondering, are we seeing a rise in Catholic students at the same time that's commensurate with the population growth? Because I fear there's some concern here amongst members that, well, we've got all this new house building here, we're denying potential Catholic families having a local school. But what I hear from other councillors is we've had population growth, we've had other schools, if you like, on the chopping block, and none of those things have changed their pupil role. This is something particular to this one school.
Yeah, I think we've had decline in all confessions, so that complicates the position. Councillor Parry, and then perhaps Fiona, if you could just round up the debate.
Yeah, Provost, I was just jumping in to do similar. So I just wanted to clarify that I'm still, wanting to welcome the U-turn. Let's call it what it is, that we won't be closing those other denominational schools. However, I would decline the second part of the recommendations, which is to move to statutory closure. So I'm happy to move to remove that. So that would then become my amendment.
Thank you for that. Councillor McCall.
Happy to second Councillor Parry's amendment.
The amendment is to remove the specific consultation portion relating to St Margaret's. And Councillor Hardy, but I think he's perhaps not intent. Fiona, any closing remarks? To be clear, we're not voting on the closure itself, we're voting on the consultation.
This is a request for approval to carry out a statutory consultation the Catholic Church, the members of the community, the staff, the families will all be statutory consultees, and that after the consultation period, a report will be brought back to the council to make the ultimate decision.
Okay, so we have a motion to accept the recommendations proposed by Councillor Muirhead and seconded by Councillor Hackett. We have an amendment which is to drop out the portion to do with St Margaret's, which is Councillor Parry, seconded by Councillor McCall. So we're for the motion or for the amendment mode. Democratic Services, so we have a roll call, please.
Yes, Provost. Councillor Alexander.
As recommended in the paper. So I think that's as it is.
For the motion.
For the motion.
For the motion. Councillor Cassidy.
For the motion.
Councillor Curran.
For the motion.
Councillor Hackett.
For the motion.
Councillor Hardy.
For the amendment.
Councillor Emery.
For the motion.
Councillor Johnston.
For the amendment.
Councillor Leigh Douglas.
For the motion.
Councillor McCall.
For the amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie.
For the motion, thanks.
Councillor Milligan.
For the motion.
Councillor Muirhead.
For the motion.
Councillor Monroe.
For the motion.
Councillor Parry.
For the amendment.
Councillor Russell.
For the motion.
Councillor Smale.
Abstain.
Councillor Wallace.
For the amendment.
Councillor Winchester.
For the motion.
So the motion's passed by 12 votes to 5.
Thank you. I propose we press on. I realise it's getting close to 1 o'clock, but it would be quite useful if we can have a break between the public and the private documents. So we move on to what I'd hope would be a easily accepted paper, 818, instrumental music. Joan Trinent, this is the additional paper which depended on COSLA and Scottish Government deliberations.
Provost. Yep. So apologies for the lateness of this report. So Council is asked to note the implications of the Scottish Government's 100-day commitment to provide instrumental music tuition free, as outlined by the First Minister in her statement on the 26th of May 2021. Council will continue to work in partnership with Scottish Government, COSLA and other stakeholders to develop and fund a sustainable music service beyond 21-22 academic year. That for the 21-22 academic year, there will be additional government grant income to offset the budgeted shortfall for loss of parental income. That as a consequence, recharge to schools for additional SQA tuition will cease and budget will be realigned to reflect this. And the risk of increased demand and associated rise in costs and delivery of the service when provided free in line with the 100-day commitment. So Council is asked to approve the interim prioritisation criteria for young people taking instrumental music tuition as detailed in 5.1 of the report in light of the removal of fees, and B, a review of the wider creative arts provision including instrumental music service based on a new modernised delivery model. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. So some good news for the Council. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Provost. Yep, it is absolutely good news. I'm so grateful that the Scottish Government put this forward in their manifesto and that the people of Scotland overwhelmingly voted for it. I think it's an absolute disgrace that this council ever took the decision to start charging for music tuition. So I think this is absolutely welcome. The only thing that I would say, just to be pernickety, is just in the appendix around taking a preventative approach. It said that this didn't qualify somehow. I disagree with that. I think it is a preventative measure in terms of young people and their successes, closing the attainment gap. So I just thought I would add that comment in there, Joan, and wondered if you had any thoughts on that. But great to see this coming forward. Fantastic.
Okay, Councillor Parry, thanks very much for that. I take note of that, and yeah, I do agree with that. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Muirhead.
Provost, yeah, thanks. To note though, in the report, it does make the point that at this point it's unknown as to what the increase in demand is going to be here in terms of how many extra people will take up this this opportunity because it is no longer being charged for. And then the question arises, is the money that's supplied by the Scottish Government to fund this adequate to meet the shortfall that we'll have as a result? And that like quite a number of things, it's all very well making these kind of statements. If the cash to support that doesn't follow from the Scottish Government, then we'll have a problem. And the problem will be that we'll need to cut services elsewhere in order to meet that shortfall.
Indeed so. Councillor Hackett.
Thank you, Provost. I know as a parent that had a child that was using free music tuition, I was quite happy to pay for an element of that. I appreciate it's not a statutory service, but I recognise the importance it has for her learning, and we've ended up getting private lessons for guitar anyway. We've dropped the school lessons because they weren't being run during the pandemic, and I'm just wondering how a parent in my situation, how that impacts on how it's being judged and measured around who gets access to this. And I really do share Councillor Muirhead's concerns. You look at the headline of the manifesto, it's free music tuition to all pupils. But then when you actually start looking at the detail, that's not the case. And I'm wondering is this a stage one of the funding of this programme, or is this it? And is this just another example of, for example, free 1140-hour childcare, where we've shown that the Midlothian Council was underfunded by 28% of the overall costs? I go back to free school meals. When I spoke to councillors at the time of the introduction of that, the core grant was cut more than the money that was ring-fenced for free school meals. And that tends to be the habit and the case of the way that the Scottish Government make these announcements, is they promise to the public that all these things will be provided free, at the same time as cutting the council's core budget, and as Councillor Muirhead references, cuts elsewhere. Added to that as well, I know quite a bit of work had been done looking at the Welsh model of delivering music tuition. My understanding in Wales is a national charity that's supported by the version of COSLA in Wales and by the Welsh Government, and they provide a bulk of the music tuition to pupils across Wales. There was some exploring work done here with parents and other groups around alternative delivery models. So questions around that. Also, one of my concerns around this has always been about poorer families' access to music. And one of my concerns is what we end up doing with free music tuition is other families take up 2 instruments for free rather than more families taking up 1 instrument. So giving a family an introduction to music rather than another family taking on more. And I'm just wondering what work could be done and what powers do we have to make sure that free music tuition is delivered to those who most need the free element of it, as opposed to everyone's need to access music. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll give Joan Trinette some time to think about that and other comments. Can we move then to Councillor Johnson and Councillor Cassidy, and then back to Joan?
Thank you very much. I suppose when it comes to the budget, it doesn't matter what you're spending your money on or how you're going to spend it on, it's how you prioritise your money. It's the same with the money in your pocket, what you want to do. Do you want to go to the bookies, the pub, the restaurant or Tesco or whatever? It's all to do with priorities. However, I think what John says as well about making sure that all children get at least one musical instrument rather than some kids getting more than one makes it a bit more even in our society. And also I'm looking forward post-COVID carry on that we all get back to the Usher Hall and can celebrate the children and their wonderful renditions of some beautiful music they play. That's something that I have missed, and I did miss it when I was ill as well, I do know that, but I'm looking forward to hearing Midlothian bairns performing really well.
As are we all. Thank you very much. Councillor Cassidy.
Councillor Muirhead. I think in light of what Councillor Milligan said earlier on the background of Kate Forbes' performance, I think this is a Scottish Government that we can trust, a Scottish Government that does have the interests of the people and they will deliver. So thank you.
Thank you for that. We have a recommendation which requires a proposer and a seconder.
Sorry, Provost, I had a number of questions for.
Yes.
Thank you.
Joan, perhaps if you could round up on the question of spreading the tuition.
Yeah, I mean, as everyone knows, this is a 1 year, funding bid at this moment in time. There's still lots of further discussions in relation to how this is going to be sustained going forward. At the same time, we're also going to be doing a major review of our service to make sure that we have a sustainable and modern service going forward. I think that the guys have stepped up hugely in relation to COVID. They have delivered music despite COVID to many, many students across Midlothian. But what we need is something that is sustainable going forward. So we are looking at different models, and this is an opportune time, I suppose, in relation to saying that creative arts needs to be looked at in relation to its entirety, so that we can deliver a model that we can afford going forward once we get more information from Scottish Government and from COSLA in relation to what that funding model will look like going forward. Sorry, John, I don't know if there was any other questions in there, but I'm happy to take any offline if you want to come back to me in relation to answering any other points that you made.
Thank you. And so back to a proposer and a seconder for the motion, the approval at F, the prioritisation criteria.
I'll move approval, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Muirhead. Seconded by Councillor Hackett. Is anyone contrary minded? That's it. Thank you very much. Councillors, I'm very conscious we're now at what, 10 past 1, and the next item is actually a very important one, despite the relatively short paper we have on it. So what I'm going to do is propose a break now, even though we're still in public session. That will then mean a short break later on while we all retune into the private session. So can I suggest that we all regroup at 1:30? That's a 20-minute break. 1:30, see you back here, and we look at the Council Building Rationalisation and Housing Redevelopment paper. We're back up to 31 attendees, so I think it's time to start again on Council Building Rationalisation and Housing Development. That's the item 819 in your pack. We have Kevin Anderson, but also I think Andrew Wynne able to comment on the work the Council have been doing on this important topic. Kevin, do you want to kick off?
Thank you, Provost. So this report reflects the outcomes from the all-member seminar, which was held on the 23rd of June. We are leading in our new ways of working through the COVID pandemic. We learned what is of value as we responded to working in our communities and with our communities. Clearly, as we learn to live with this virus and the prospects of future similar events, it's through supporting and engagement with our workforce that we have consulted to get the right balance of where and how we work. This also reflects the First Minister's recent statement in terms of continuing to work from home where possible. And as we develop these different work settings on a locality basis for the hub-spoken model, in terms of in-person service delivery, which will also assist to reduce our transport and travel as a consequence. Another consequence is the factor of rationalisation for the council's under-occupied, underused, and indeed unfit buildings that do not meet efficiency and sustainability standards in the Council's declared zero carbon ambition. The identified properties in this paper have a range of options in divesting or disposal as they otherwise deteriorate or decline further, blighting the town centre. And the option in terms of the consequence is a solution for housing-led redevelopment. This is also proposed with an indicative project which we outlined at the seminar for residential, retail, leisure and commercial options, with a further detailed design and funding of a placemaking model brought back to Council for the town centre living opportunities that this presents to meet the public demand relative to our housing waiting list. Provost, the decision requested today is to bring back proposals. It's not to make conclusive decision in terms of the redevelopment today. If property rationalisation does not proceed, the Council will continue to incur costs for buildings that we no longer fully utilise or require when there's a viable HRA capital programme which can be brought forward for vibrant town centres. And the Council has recommended to agree reducing those buildings and to maximise their value through disposal. And if it's of help, certainly to members, our recently appointed heads of development are available to speak to the process in their respective experience of regeneration and reinvigorating town centres, with Andrew Wynne and Fiona Clandillan being available. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, and can I also welcome Andrew and Fiona. So this is a direction of travel resolution that we're asked to agree by way of recommendation. Clearly, a huge amount of work's gone into this. Just time, I think, for councillors to perhaps query the speed and the flexibility of what we're going to be attempting. Comments from the floor? Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost. I think firstly, I want to recognise the efforts of staff to facilitate this shift, this new direction of travel, as you put it, new ways of working across the council to continue to deliver services within our communities, which is resulting in moving away from the traditional office estate. I know the report notes that they need to plan and work together, and I'm going to propose a specific recommendation, Provost, and that reads, for officers to work with elected members and communities to bring back a deliverable town centre plan. Provost, I've spoken to local residents in the last week or so, and there's a lot of excitement about this. I'm excited about it. I think it's good that it's being underpinned, it's being led by housing, which offers, I think, sustainability to any plan that might come forward. But it can't just be about housing, it needs to be visionary. We need to be able to attract new businesses to our town centres and give our town centres new opportunities. So I acknowledge this as the direction of travel, and that specific recommendation, I'll just read that again, for officers to work with elected members and communities to bring back a deliverable town centre plan. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. So you're expanding the remit to a wider sort of Dalkeith orientated question of exactly what the composition of the town could be, not just to do with offices and to do with housing, but also the commercial activity in between and indeed the whole environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Curran's proposal to extend the remit? Putting you on the spot. I think I heard the Deputy Provost there.
Yes, you did.
Margot, thank you. We'll put that on the blackboard and continue with the discussions. Councillor Winchester.
Thank you, Provost. Kevin, I note that it's the proposal to close all the main council building and for all the staff to work from home. Has there been a survey of staff to ask them what they would prefer? I know other areas, other companies have surveyed the staff and they've come back with a mixed way of working. So they have hot desking plus home working for those who would like to work in an office occasionally.
Yep. Would Kevin like to field that?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Winchester. Yes, indeed, we have surveyed staff. We'd outlined at the seminar last week and appreciate not all members were able to attend that. The range of supports and engagements that we have undertaken in the last 14 months, and clearly staff wellbeing has been predominant there, and how we manage staff remotely, doing all that differently. Clearly are areas that we still continue to develop, and that's where we engaged Nesta with the Listen and Learn back. To get to the point of your exact question, we'd surveyed across the Police Directorate particularly. We took a sample there rather than across the whole organisation, and my recollection from the numbers last week was something in the region of 1,300 staff per place, and that came down to a number of actually 16 who could not work remotely in some other shape or form. And that's largely because we were dealing with duty cover for in-person requirements, such as those who present to us in crisis through social work or homelessness, for example. Clearly, we need an in-person presence. We've been able to work around that, but it's not been ideal over these past 14 months. So it's taken account of those requirements and our statutory responsibilities. So predominantly, people were in favour, as you say, of working remotely and continuing to have the opportunity to do some model in that respect.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Provost. Speaking for my ward constituents, I wouldn't say excitement was one of the feedbacks I got. I'd say confusion, bewilderment and suspicion are three of the main feedbacks I've had from my constituents. And if you go on social media, you can read this, because the way this has been presented suddenly on the back of the worst pandemic of any of our lives, well, the only pandemic in my life, it's just comes at a very insensitive time. I think the timing of the announcement, the way that it's got out into the public, we're talking about a town that has been neglected for at least 30 years, a town that has been put on the back burner with decision after decision being kicked into the long grass about redeveloping Dalkeith. Now, suddenly we come up with a estate management plan to pull down all the council buildings and leave everybody standing there sucking their thumb saying, what's going to happen next? I think it's good enough the way this has been presented. I think we could have done this differently. I think we could have rolled it out in a more humane manner, if you like, a more sympathetic manner towards the people of Dalkeith, who have had to suffer a lot over the years. I mean, this is a council that pulled down a community centre in Woodburn and didn't replace it, promised the people they get a nice new community centre. So you can understand why suspicion comes into this equation. I agree with Councillor Kern on that we must consult with our constituents, with the people of this town, because if we don't, we're going to have a problem on our hands. So that's all I've got to say on this matter for the time being. But I really do, I urge you to be more cautious and sympathetic with the way that we deal with this.
Thank you for that contribution, and also Dalkeith Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you. I can concur quite a lot with what Councillor Cassidy is saying, given that I kind of lived through it as a local member when we were in the process of the community centre and the failings that happened with that. The mistake we made was my opinion, was we knocked the damn thing down before we rebuilt anywhere else. We were working towards another centre, and folks shouldn't forget that, because we had plans, lottery bids, it just wasn't successful. And there was obviously issues about where the new element was going to go, and people up that end weren't very, very happy with it. I wasn't actually surprised, to be honest, when I saw this paper coming through. As Colin quite rightly said, there's been at least 3 attempts to regenerate Dalkeith Town Centre, all failed. The last we had was 2019, where there was a short-lived working group that we tried to put something together, and actually part of that report, which was an internal document, can I put it that way? And it was looking at things like the sale of the Clue House, upper floors to house and revenue account, you know, other parts like that, the Dalkeith Arts Centre and the library, and they would occupy what was the ground floor of the Clue House. So that to me looks as though it's in the mix of what documents you're talking about. I haven't got an issue with B, which is obviously house-led development, housing-led, sorry. I have got a problem with A, which is pretty vague. You know, it looks as though you're shutting everything down, but obviously you're not. You're only, and it's going to be a phased process. But what I'm asking for today, and I understand it's going to come back to us with a bit more information, but I'm putting a stamp down now that the library and the arts centre will not be knocked down until we have a replacement that serves the community and adds on to the community, especially the arts centre, which we used to have, obviously before the pandemic, but there was things like plays, there was theatre productions. You know, we did a lot in that arts centre. The design was always, I thought, it was a bit different because there are 2 separate parts to it, which sometimes didn't lend itself to any sort of productions. So I'll be taking a great interest in what's happening with our library and our arts centre, because the amount of people that use our library, the older generation, still like a book, still like paper, and we do want to build up on the facilities for the Arts Centre, especially things for young people. I think would be good. And for housing and business, we want to bring in some sort of element of community use as well, given that we've, as Colin quite rightly said, taken away the community centre from Woodburn / Dalkeith. So I'm quite happy to move with Councillor Curran's suggestion that we are all involved in any communications, any paperwork, and we relate that out to the public. Because yes, Colin's quite right, there's a lot of suspicion. I see it on Facebook as well, and obviously I can come in for a fair bit of criticism, which is fine. I can always answer back. And we do live in different times, and sometimes we've got to move with the times. But another thing that worries me personally as an elected member is nothing in here talks about how the elected members would operate, how they would interact with their constituents. I mean, I go out to the shops, I speak to people, I get cases, I get emails, but I do still miss that interaction of having surgeries. And I know that's not going to happen at the moment, given the times we're living in, but we should be planning forward to re-engage with surgeries and our constituents, because they're suffering out there. To be honest, they don't know what's happening. They phone up the council, and you know, I say contact services try their best, and there's a lot of changes in the council, and you know, I have to sympathise, and I do. When people complain, I do explain. Please be patient with us. So I would be looking for something, and for the elected members, how do we interact with democracy again? This meeting is taped, recorded, what you want to call it, but it's not good enough. Honestly, it's not good enough. And the mistakes that are made, the technology, leaves people to get, you know, so frustrated about it sometimes. And it doesn't make for good governance. And I'll finish on that. Thank you, Provost, for your patience and your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I think you've accentuated the fact that the motion is somewhat vague, and when you specify the library and the Arts Centre should not be demolished, well, maybe what we as councillors need is an undertaking from the officers that no building will be demolished until the councillors have agreed to it. Again, setting the direction of travel, but having the final decision reserved to us. How, Kevin Anderson, would you feel about that? Or are actually you looking for plenary powers to flog stuff off and demolish it as a result of us agreeing this?
Thank you, Provost. So this is not a wholesale demolition proposal that's come forward. It's about looking at opportunities for re-provisioning, repurposing, and indeed revitalising the town centres. And appreciate in terms of some of the community feedback about being frustrated and dismayed from earlier iterations of what these proposals seek to achieve this time. The reason that it's profiled up as housing led is largely because we have control of a number of those properties as we've carried out acquisitions over the years, again from some of those earlier iterations that came through, so that at some point in the future that we would have the opportunity to lead on that, because certainly leaving that to the market forces over the last 10-20 years has not proven fruitful whatsoever, either as the planning authority to enable that. So it's really about us changing tack in that regard. We have the benefit, as we've talked about earlier, of a healthy HRA, which we're looking to utilise here, and certainly in terms of the housing demand that we've got on our waiting lists, we can address that. Looking ahead, we're certainly clear that there will be an impact at the end of furlough as we continue to work through this pandemic with the prospect of coming out of it. So there'll be those additional requirements in service demands that we need to address as well. So it's about creating that vibrancy in the town centre. I don't think any of you are advocating for leaving things as they currently are. And certainly as we decentralise out of these prime buildings, or certainly prime location buildings, it's looking at those opportunities that we don't continue the on costs of our rates and our overheads for buildings which have, I can assure you, have been here for 14 months, largely unoccupied. So we need to certainly address that, and that opportunity is now. But certainly we need to bring this back relative to the governance as to what those proposals and practicalities are. As I indicated, Provost, the decision today is not to give me carte blanche for wholesale demolition. It's to go and work up those proposals, but I'm not willing to go and task officers who don't have the capacity or the time scales in which to deliver those unless members are minded to do so. Thank you.
Okay, so it goes back to these words at the end of the purpose. Buildings are no longer occupied, fit for purpose, or required by the council. Now, I read that as meaning that the council will have the final decision on any building as to whether it is required by the council. I just want to make sure that that is understood.
I'm happy if that's specified, Provost, in the minute of this meeting to give you that reassurance, because our intent is nothing but that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, thank you. Provost, I think the critical word there is to allow officers to go and work up proposals to be brought back to council for approval. There's no any approval to not doing any buildings or any sort. I think, Kevin, it would be helpful, I think, if maybe Andrew or Fiona wanted to touch on the timescales of how long this would take for day one before actually you would be thinking of changing a window, not let alone knocking down a building. And I think it would be helpful to give a bit of guidance to elected members so they're clearly aware of the process of doing this, because even though councillors decide, well, we're not wanting Buccleuch House, for example, it's surplus to requirements, there's still a planning requirement to go in there for anything that's going to replace that. And I would suspect you'd also need building warrants to knock it down. So you've still got all the statutory stuff to go through. That's here. So talking about a timescale and giving us an idea of what that timescale is and what the hoops are. I think that the amendment that Councillor Kearns put forward to actually work with the local communities and the council and report back on proposals and timescales for them, I think's there. I think takes care of that, but I think it's important that we have to acknowledge that whenever we do things like this, social media overtakes us, and Councillor Cassidy is quite right to point out that, you know, before elected members were seeing this, you were seeing it appearing on social media sites at some places. And we are going to have to learn how to do things differently here, because we're getting caught out with this all the time. As we go to consider things, social media carries it all away from us before we actually get to take the decisions. But there has to be a starting point somewhere. There has to be a point at some stage you have that first discussion. I think one of the things we need to be really clear on here, and I'm hoping, Kevin, your team can comment on some of this stuff, and some of the discussions that have been held elsewhere. I've looked at some of the stuff that's been done in other towns and stuff like that. And indeed, when we actually interviewed the heads of services, one of the things that was impressing us was the wide array of stuff that both new heads of services, Andrew and Fiona, had been involved in. So I think that would be really helpful for the officers, and especially for the Dalkeith members, to sort of go over areas where there have been town centre improvements like this that have led to improvements, and actually look at the areas where it's maybe actually not worked as well, so that we learn from that. I wouldn't mind officers talking about what their vision is for Dalkeith town centre. I mean, because whilst this is housing led and it makes it affordable, it makes it possible, I think the word that Stevie used there was, it has to be a deliverable plan that comes back, because all too often, 1999, I first sat down and listened to a regeneration of Dalkeith. Every single plan that's came back has came back massively unaffordable, because officers get carried away with stuff. They're just absolutely carried away with what they're doing, and it comes back unaffordable, and it just ends up sinking. So I think what we need to be talking about here is not just the fact that it's housing led. We need to be talking about what officers are going to do to engage with business, to attract different shops to the area, to see if any of the existing shops would like purpose-built buildings. You know, it might be that it's all shops on the ground floor, it might be offices on the second floor, and council housing, mid-market rent, private housing on the top floor. There needs to be that mix, there needs to be that array of stuff there to make sure that's there. We've also talked for many years about managing to bring the third sector together. We all see as we passed it pre-pandemic, the queues outside the cab office. We've all spoken to the third sector about the possibility of having centralised offices with shared accommodations and that for them to work out, to reduce their costs, to help with stuff. You have all that opportunity there, and that can only be got by actually sitting down with the third sector, the voluntary sector, the public and councillors and sort of saying, right, what do we need? What can we get in here? But I also want to make sure that we're looking to try and attract different businesses. You're clearly getting feedback that a lot of big businesses are wanting to come out of their big office spaces in central Edinburgh, their expensive stuff, and they're looking for touchdown bases on a locality basis, not unlike the council. Not unlike the council, we need to be looking to make sure that if we've got to build something, can we, is there something there to attract these businesses to come to Dalkeith, to bring people back into Dalkeith? Because let's make no bones about this, any town centre you go to Edinburgh, and the thing that hits you right away is the amount of for lease, for sale that's up in shops. And I think that's all over the country. Town centres are in real trouble now, because people are choosing to go with your Amazons and all your other areas. That's one of the biggest threats to them. Here you have an ideal opportunity to design and develop something in Dalkeith that would see the future of Dalkeith Town Centre. And let's not kid on here, we're not talking about getting rid of every council building. I've seen people talking about, oh, they've got to knock down Fairfield House. Absolutely not. I mean, it's a list of beautiful building, indeed, probably the area we need to keep. Even though we're going to move from needing as many council buildings, we're still going to need council buildings. We're still going to have a council headquarters. You're still going to have somewhere where essential staff come in to work, whether that be in education, whether it be in social work, what have you. So you're going to still have to have that. So let's not get on, we're looking everything down here, and you're going to end up with just this, like, but we'll have an ideal opportunity here in Dalkeith. And it has to be a visionary opportunity, but it has to be a realistic opportunity. Thank you.
Visionary but realistic. There's a lot in there. There's a question of the timescale, given the past and also possibly site assembly issues. There's a question of how we attract retail at a time when retail is generally leaving Scottish high streets. We've got the question of the third sector, which has a congregation here, and the question of what essential staff will require. I'm going to skip the councillors at this point and perhaps go to Fiona, who's very bravely put her hand up, just to react to some or all of the points that the leader of the council has made.
No, thanks very much, Councillor Smill. I just thought I'd just try to address some of those things. I suppose the main thing is to view this as an opportunity, and I realise there's some concern, obviously, over when you hear people talk about rationalisation, it's framed in a way of loss. But to my mind, I always see that as, well, this is a catalyst for change. As Councillor Russell highlighted earlier, there have been plans previously that haven't happened. Whereas change like this is actually an opportunity to refresh those, to make sure they're fit for purpose, but then also reconfigure it to make sure that we're taking advantage of the opportunities it presents us. So whether it's new buildings and new assets that we can re-provide, whether it's a reconfiguration of services along the hub and spoke model, and of course utilising the HRA as well in a way that we haven't done before. So we're using it in a proactive way. And just to go back to some of the points that Councillor Milligan brought up there, I think the housing-led nature of it is quite critical, because so much of what you described there in terms of having a bustling high street, attracting shops, attracting businesses, all rely on footfall. And the easiest way to attain footfall and activity is through providing housing and animation in a town centre. And that's really what housing can do for you. But also, as I said, kind of reconfigured services potentially integrated into that vision. So I do think that there is an opportunity here that we should be trying to seize on, I suppose. And that's how I see it, as being quite a positive opportunity for these town centres where perhaps things haven't moved forward in the past. I think in terms of timescale, I defer to Kevin on that, to be honest, but certainly in projects where I've been involved with before, we have quite a significant stepwise process to go through with all of this.
And we would take very seriously the points that Council has raised already, particularly around community engagement, but also that wider engagement that you described earlier with the private sector and the third sector as well, because you do view them as being important partners in place. And we want places to have something to offer for all those sectors as well. So if we can engage them and bring them in as partners if possible, if that suits that vision, I think that's really important. But in terms of the overall timescale, these things do take time, you know, and certainly I've never been involved in a master planning process that has resulted in, you know, incredibly quick change. However, saying that, sometimes you do have, you know, short-term opportunities that can and should be utilised. So if those come up, we can and do that. But again, as Kevin said, this is very much a direction of travel that we're going into. So I see this as a stepwise process that we can bring in along with. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you for that. So the reintroduction of housing town centre, or increase it, because we already have it here, that's complementary to the commercial activity in your view. Councillor Parry.
Thanks, Provost. I'll certainly try and keep this brief. Yeah, I've kind of got three issues of concern. First is the impact on the local economy, and it is related to footfall. Actually, I do note comparisons with other councils where actually to get around their issues with lower footfalls, they're actually building council headquarters in town centres. Because the problem that we've got here is that, you know, as Councillor Milligan just said, we want to attract businesses, but what's the point in attracting businesses if you've not got the footfall? You need the customer base here, and having the council estate where it is certainly helps businesses, particularly in Dalkeith. And I haven't seen any engagement with businesses at all whatsoever in this. And in fact, I think there should be, you know, some sort of economic analysis of this incredibly early if it does go ahead at all. Secondly, the impact on workforce in terms of our employees. I don't think that this has been fully thought through, and I note that there was some chat about what level of engagements we've had with staff. I don't know what other groups have done, but I know that we certainly met with representatives from the unions, and they weren't particularly happy about a kind of wholesale working from home move at all, and there's many equality implications that I don't feel like have been thought through properly. And the last thing is just the impact to residents and our communities. If we are going to, you know, look at, I think the Chief Executive called it a pillar. The digital strategy was a pillar of how we are going to come out of the pandemic. And I feel like this is another one of those pillars that, you know, add up to a very different looking council in the future. And like Councillor Russell says, sometimes we do have to go forward and make that change. But, you know, I think even now, you know, when I get constituents in touch saying, you know, they're trying to get in touch with people, or they can't find the right page on the website, you know, they get passed with pillar to post. They just want to be able to go into their, you know, the rent office or whatever and get help for somebody. So I just didn't foresee how that's going to work out well for us. And just to pick up the point of governance, Kevin, so I think what you had said is, yeah, you're just kind of here to get a scope so that you can go away, but then, you know, every single individual thing will come back. You know, maybe it would have been a better idea just to kind of do it that way, you know. And if you didn't want people to be out there on social media thinking that you're going to shut all the buildings, then put a paper together, you know, saying that you're going to shut all the buildings and put it in a big list like that, because I think as a council we could do much better at communicating with communities and actually taking them with us. And, you know, there was an opportunity here to do that that's just been totally missed. And the way that it even landed on councillors' laps wasn't great. I mean, it came up at another committee. There had been no notification to the Dalkeith ward members, you know, and I just look at, you know, other kind of smaller regeneration projects that we've done in Midlothian or tried to do, you know, where they come back over cost, or, you know, they can't be done for X, Y, Z reasons. And that just seems to be like every single project at the moment. So I'm not sure that I've got faith and confidence in this project at the moment, and I think that that's a really sad moment for any councillor to be in. But I think just given the issues with Jarnac Court and you know, other projects that we've had to pull out of the Lonehead Police Station, I'm not feeling very reassured about our capacity to do these type of projects at the moment. So I'm sorry about that, but that's just how I feel on it at the moment. But I'm looking forward to seeing the other points as well.
Thank you, Councillor Parry, for words of caution there. Councillor Hackett. then Councillor Winchester.
Thank you, Provost. Just with respect to our workforce and working from home, speaking personally, I come at it with 3 different hats on. One as a worker myself. I've been working from home throughout this pandemic. Our employer took the decision to sell our office. They are getting a new one, but even when people are allowed to go back to the office, I'm not able to do that. And it has mixed feelings about that. I've quite enjoyed working from home, but I'd probably sit with most people where I'd want the blended version to that. Secondly, as a councillor, it's making sure, one, our own workforce is happy with these arrangements and safe, and that, more importantly, services are continued to be delivered. And I know there's a lot of frustrations with our customer service centres not being open. Our residents are missing that sort of person-to-person interaction when trying to do business with the council. However, as a member of the Cabinet, I'd asked the Chief Executive, and I think certainly 2, if not 3 surveys have been done throughout this pandemic to test the water about how staff are feeling around the working from home arrangements. And we've discussed, ensuring that where people do need or want to come into their office, they're able to do that. And for those people who don't, the old excuse of the manager just wanting everyone in the office is gone. Those days are gone. That's not an excuse to have people in these days. And if people are able to carry out their duties working from home and they're happy to do it, that's something we should be supporting. And then equally, as a trade union official, I've been discussing this with employers over the last 14 to 16 months. And again, I don't see Midlothian Council being any different to any other employer. There'll be a chunk of people that want to stay at home. There'll be a chunk of people that want to come back to work full time. And then the bulk of people will want something in between. And I've quite confidence, given that we've deliberately appointed 2 officers just to work on these types of development. So, the council have made the decision to bring in those expertise to help us deliver these types of projects. So I have a level of confidence. So that's just to touch on the working from home issue. And yes, I've had engagement with the local trade unions and heard their concerns on those points as well. I think it's important that we learn from our history, but not be beholden to it. And I totally take on board comments from Councillor Russell about some of the issues that happened with the last iteration of the town centre development. I was involved originally as chair of Dalkeith Community Council, and then as an S-Bank community councillor, and then in a latter iteration as a representative of One Dalkeith, which is the development trust set up by those 2 community councils, with the very purpose of reinvigorating the town centre and bringing back community facilities. So I am nervous, but I'm really excited, because the one key word, or there's 2 key parts to this to me, it's deliverability, which has to rest on its affordability. And what's been missing, I think, from what I hear of the last 3 plans. And this is where the housing side of it and the council's own estate will be driving, I would say, mostly the affordability part of that. But the key part, obviously, is our communities. And we've seen the reaction. We've had a press report about a paper that hasn't been available to the public. I don't know if the public can go onto the website right now and pick up that report, because it wasn't there yesterday. So you can imagine where I'm getting contact from my friend, but the chair of One Dalkeith, who said, hang on a minute, we're in the single Midlothian plan. We're identified as a key stakeholder for developments in the Dalkeith town centre, and no one's come to speak with us. So I think we all have to acknowledge that there's been an issue there about how this is communicated at the start. But if you look at what the paper is asking us to do, it's to say, well, we're starting that journey. We're going. We don't know where the destination is yet. We don't know what's going to happen along the way, but we want to make that start. And I very much saw today's meeting about helping set a bit of that direction for the council officers. So in terms of my message in that, community engagement has to be key. There are key partners in doing that. I would also say there's a very big difference between MVA and what is sometimes called the community and voluntary sector, which is often organisations that deliver services through grant funding. I would see their needs and input into this being quite different. It's identified in the paper. We've talked about the third sector hub, and they will have a constituent body to represent, but very often, in my experience, when I go into meetings, they're talking about what they need as an organisation to help them deliver. And this is this idea of the one-stop shop and everything that's come from there. So some real scope there. That's very different to what I would say what local residents need, and that's where the community councils and the development trust, which can tie in that, and the business voice. We don't have a local business association as such in Dalkeith, but we do have the Federation of Small Business. We have the Chamber, Midlothian and East Lothian Chamber of Commerce. But again, more importantly, One Dalkeith is the Development Trust, which has a very specific piece of work that looks at economic regeneration and business engagement. So there are lots of organisations locally that can help us. Nationally, we also have the Town Centre Partnership. You know, there's work going on through the City Region Deal, all sorts of other external partners that can help us along with this journey. I would urge officers to utilise these organisations as best as possible. I did share concerns around the governance, and I'm pleased with the amendment that Councillor Curran's brought forward, because I think that should hopefully ease some of those concerns. But I'm satisfied that whatever we agree today, it's not going to end in the bulldozers turning up into Dalkeith tomorrow, albeit some people may celebrate that if that were to happen. Thank you very much, Provost.
I hope they don't, because we're trying to have a council meeting regarding licences tomorrow. Councillor Winchester, you've experience of how the NHS is handling this transition?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to Kevin about the staff survey and just check that if it's going to be done for all staff currently using the buildings. And there is a huge difference by posing the question, can they work from home, or would they like to work from home? Or what is their best, what would be best for them? And I suggest it would be better to ask the staff what is best for them rather than can they? Because as we've seen, the majority of staff, 99% of staff can work from home, but there's still a minority that don't want to.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Winchester. Certainly we recognise that position, absolutely, and the questions being posed in that respect, both to line managers, to pick up an earlier point, but also to the staff directly. And certainly I'm aware of some of the union feedback equally, because I've sat down and engaged with them as we've done these past 14 months, as is our practice. But certainly that moves us to the stage of that one-to-one consultation with staff directly, as opposed to relying on any initial pulse surveys that we've carried out and initial responses to very closed questions, because we do appreciate there's a whole range of circumstances which do exist across the workforce in terms of the practicalities of that. Yes.
Yeah, and also the preferences of the workforce will change over time and as they come out of the lockdown. Councillor Curran.
Thanks, Provost. I mean, my interpretation was the same as yours, but just to safeguard that, that's why I brought that amendment forward. And that, you know, we're not given carte blanche here to officers to go away and develop a plan and then just press ahead with that. And Kevin Anderson's confirmed that. I'm going to be honest, Provost, I'm astounded by some of the comments I hear here and the negativity around this. You know, no consultation, not fully thought through, no faith or confidence. Well, I'm going to focus on the positives. This is an exciting opportunity for Dalkeith. Yes, we need a deliverable plan. We need a new, vibrant town centre. It's not going to happen overnight, but this council can deliver it with the right plan. And part of the reason for bringing forward the amendment was that so we can also have governance over these key milestones. So like we say, there's Midlothian House, isn't it, suddenly demolished. So as far as I read, and Kevin Anderson's confirmed that, the governance is there. And I want to focus on the positivity. With a deliverable plan, we can do this and we can regenerate Dalkeith.
Thank you. And Councillor Alexander.
Sorry, yes.
She's stand up for a long time.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have, yeah, just a few points and a few questions. Consultation, yes, coming back to that. We do need to consult the population of Dalkeith and Midlothian, what they want for this historic market town. And I think we need to look at history and see what an important town Dalkeith was and how important it made Midlothian And to focus, I mean, I know that the plans aren't set in place, but to focus on house building is actually saying what we're going to look at. And do we really want to be a dormitory town of Edinburgh? And if we do have houses in Dalkeith, if we are focusing on building houses in Dalkeith, what are the people there actually going to do for amenities? Are they going to have the library? Are they going to have places for safe places for children just to go out and play, you know, ride their bikes or whatever? So I think by putting a focus, we are putting the direction of where we want Dalkeith to go, and is that necessary the right thing for Dalkeith to be focusing on? I think we need to look at the history, tourism, businesses, having a thriving community, and we have lots of new residents in Midlothian at the moment, and it's growing and growing and growing. What are we doing to make those residents actually want to partake in what's happening in Midlothian? So we need to have businesses and thriving communities to actually make them spend their money within Midlothian, and that is how we can regenerate what was a very thriving historic town.
Certainly, Simon. Let's not forget, though, the regeneration of the High Street from St Nicholas Church to Dalkeith Palace. That's a wonderful transformation we've had there. It's just more approaches like that would be highly positive. Councillor Winchester, your hand's still up. Councillor Winchester, no, and the very patient Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Provost. Just before I ask my question, I would just like to say that I think the ward members spoke well for the residents, particularly Councillor Russell spoke with a great deal of passion about what it means for the people of Dalkeith. So I'd like to commend that. In 3.4, it talks about continuous improvement being one of the key drivers for doing this. Now, it may be too early, but I'm wondering, have we identified what the measurements of that key performance is going to be? Because obviously, if we're going to be asked at some point to vote or to approve us doing it, I'd like to know what we'd like to achieve by basically moving out of mid-house, if that's what happens. Another question is on the risk analysis on 4.3. These are all risks of not carrying out the project. Is there a more balanced approach we could take to doing that? Surely that completing the project carries risk as well. So if possible, Kevin, I'd like to see them isolated. Thanks. Talking about the staff members, I do say I have got concerns that the council loses its centre of gravity. So picking for no particular reason, say you get a job in planning. At the moment, or pre-COVID, you would go and join the planning department. You'd be surrounded by a wealth of experience of people who know what they're doing. I'm wondering, has the council fully thought through the implications of, in the future, a new member of staff joins the planning team, you're working from home, you maybe only see your colleagues 1 or 2 days a week. So clearly that's going to impact on how you learn to do your job. So I would like to see a lot of assurance that the council has fully thought through the implications that this will have on their own staff.
Thank you. And I think there's an expression, critical path analysis is there, and it's been asked earlier in this meeting, how can we have a roadmap that we know will be completed without us discovering there's some blockage in the whole process, so we end up with planning blight in Dalkeith because we can't progress matters. And there is this pastoral thing about new employees. My own daughter had her first day with PricewaterhouseCoopers yesterday, and she had to do it digitally, and she's desperate to actually meet and correspond with others who are at the same stage of her development. And that's, I think, a good point, Councillor Mackenzie. Kevin, would you like to comment on how you're going to structure this to give us a degree of certainty that it will happen in an organised fashion?
Yeah, certainly. So it's been helpful, clearly, to get the range of feedback that we've had this afternoon, and certainly to try and achieve that governance. And that was the purpose today, was to come and get that governance and what those parameters are. Because certainly we had to start somewhere, as has been said earlier, and having not put this before you, I'd otherwise be accused of going rogue on this. And certainly we needed to have your involvement and your input into that. Certainly we anticipate addressing the points that have been made about the dispersal of our workforce. Certainly, to my mind, that certainly gives that community wealth creation opportunity as the workforce is dispersed within our communities where they need to be, so they can deliver these services in person where that's required and where that's appropriate. And certainly we appreciate there has been, through necessity, the transition to channel shift, but we're not looking to do exclusively as a wholesale digital council here either. Equally, in terms of the footfall, we are working on that premise of the 20-minute neighbourhoods. That's the reality in terms of people's lived experience these past 14 months, not just where I live, but around here as well. So certainly it's about giving that opportunity. As we make that transition through to town centre living, it clearly needs to have that range of amenities that you're asking and expecting of us. So as a consequence, if we get approval today, it's about delivering that project programme with those milestones so you can see what those outcomes are that have been achieved. Clearly also in terms of that risk element for the mitigation that's been asked and outlined today. I again come back to the fact it is housing led, but not exclusively. We've made reference in the paper clearly to the retail, the commercial, the leisure aspects that we would need to have for a town centre living community for that to be vibrant, and the amenity space and that whole placemaking agenda. That's what I reference in terms of the title for this directorate. It's the place where people live, the place where they live, the place where they work, and the place where their kids go to school. And we need to address all those elements in terms of the proposition that we bring forward to you at a future date, if you're minded to accept that. In terms of the workforce, yeah, we're still learning. We've done a heck of a lot, I have to say, and we've outlined that both at the seminar and across groups, respectively, about the range of work that's done. Nobody's done this before, so we're still learning, and certainly we're happy to take that feedback through the direct engagement we have with our staff and with those who represent them too. So we come back to the point, it is a direction of travel. We'd appreciate your agreement to that. And equally, I hear all that you're telling me about bringing that back at the appropriate stages for future governance.
Thank you. And John Hackett wants to come back in again. Councillor Hackett.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. It was just to highlight a little bit of contradiction in some of the decisions we've taken previously as a council and some of the comments here today. We've already agreed to move to a hub and spoke model. So we've already gone down the road of decentralising our services. We as a council have agreed not to have everything pulled in to the centre around the 20-minute neighbourhoods, etc. And both of those drivers are highlighted in the paper. And you know, the future vision for Midlothian. So I see this proposal being very much in keeping with that agenda. It was, thank you for the second bite of the cherry, Provost, because one of the things I've been reflecting on is when you think about where we have Dalkeith Town Centre now, the driver for that and the vision for it. And I was quite lucky when I first moved here. There was quite a large historic section of the local paper. And when I arrived, it was doing this sort of 100 years in Dalkeith prior. And it was horrifying to read, you know, the slums that occupied the space, which is now Jeanette Court. You know, families of 12 living in a 2-room house with no running water, no bathing facilities, etc. That's what Jeanette Court replaced. And in its place was, it looks old and tired now, but at its time was a hugely modern town centre, modelled on its, you know, twin town. There was a great vision about what Dalkeith was meant to be, continuing that many years of history that Councillor Alexander referred to earlier. So I don't see us being able to lose sight of that type of vision, a similar one, which is making the Dalkeith Town Centre a hub and a heart of our community. And what's changed dramatically is this housing-led approach. And as has been referred to, if it was just a housing project, it wouldn't revitalise the town centre. It would just be a housing project. But this is trying to meet a number of needs, and in doing so, present us with an opportunity that really does able to reshape the town centre for what is a post-COVID, post-online shopping, post-everything else that has changed our lives and the way we operate. And again, referring to some of the comments from Councillor Alexander, I used to live in the high street, and I accepted that that meant that my kids couldn't go riding out on their bike straight off from the front door, because it would have meant them piling right into the A road at the time. However, we're very fortunate in Dalkeith. You've got Kings Park right there. We have some council buildings already. We have Kings Park School, which is about to expand into a 3-stream. So the town centre redevelopment will be obviously a massive, massive change, but there's already lots of other things that are complementing what makes Dalkeith an excellent place to live and work in the town centre, and I'm sure this will make it even better still. Thank you.
Thank you. Much appreciated that reference, I think, to David Smith and his wonderful articles in the Advertiser over the years, which is a good cue for Councillor Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Provost, and you're quite right to refer to the late Councillor David Smith, late Provost, as he was at one time. And that particular council, way back then, what you call the Toon Council, had the vision for Janet Court, for Comeron Court and for Estill Court, which sometimes brings its own problems, because what is actually town centre? It's not just Janet Court, it's the other 2 courts as well, and part of the administration or the council. And I didn't want to finish on a negative note. I know I was sounded very angry. Well, I kind of still am a wee bit, but I wanted to finish on a positive note and say that I'm looking forward to revitalising Dalkeith. It has been sad, there's been lots of issues, and we're doing things in Janet Court to brighten it up and make it pleasant for people to sit when the sun's shining. It's good to see people sitting outside and just catching up, social distancing, hopefully. So I did want to finish on a very positive note, and we will be scrutinising that's for sure, but we will also helping officers who don't live in Dalkeith to understand the Dalkeith and what Dalkeith people think and what they would like. And I think that's part of the 3 Dalkeith elected members' job, is to make sure that their message is also heard as well. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. And Councillor Johnston.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say, oh heavens, I've lost my notes, that currently and for a long, long time, Dalkeith has been the county town and the municipal centre or civic centre for the whole county, and people from everywhere have gone to Dalkeith to do lots of their business. Yes, we had the main branch bank in there, but in the villages we had lesser little banks, but if you had to do important business you always had to go to Dalkeith. And I have a fear that once we have demolished Dalkeith and built thousands of socially rented houses, and possibly building up issues about how that's managed in the future, that it's a backdoor to having our new civic centre purpose built in Shawfair. And I want some reassurance that that is not the case, because for someone like me who will rely on public transport to get to Shawfair, it might not always be easy. Thank you.
Perhaps Councillor Anderson could respond on that. I mean, despite there being a railway from Newton Grange, I don't think there's any sense that Shawfair would be our civic centre.
No, Provost, I wouldn't want to preempt any of our future successors, but certainly as things currently stand, we've no intention in that regard at all. The whole premise of this is, as we've referenced, about decentralising, working with our communities and in our communities. And certainly, clearly, even pre-pandemic, there's been a shift in terms of what retail and commercial offerings look like and what they deliver. So we're continuing to work through that process. The whole idea of this position, again, of being housing-led is to give that vibrancy, that vitality, that presence 24/7 to a town centre, which in turn then needs the retail, the commercial, the leisure activities to serve it. And that's what's been sadly lacking. And certainly I take a different view in terms of social rented housing clearly, but anticipate that to be mixed tenure provision so that we have a balance of our communities, because there's a whole range of different housing circumstances that we look to seek to accommodate across our waiting list, and not any one particular cohort that I would consider are reflected in that. Thank you.
Thank you. As a supplementary, I just wondered as well, we talk about this hub and spoke model. So there's nothing detailed in this report about what happens in the villages. For example, the pavilion in the park that's not used anymore. Is the council going to be revitalising them and to use them as some kind of drop-in for the library in the villages? Are they going to now be able to collect rent, etc.? And do you know, there's such a lot missing in that report that I'm worried about the unintended consequences about what's not listed.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a direct effect. Kevin Anderson, briefly on that.
No, indeed there is, Prof. It's precisely the scenario that Councillor Johnson's outlined, where we before looked through community asset transfer to divest of other what might be considered smaller, minor buildings in outlying localities. We have a need for those, clearly, in terms of this new model for hub and spoke and locality delivery, because we need welfare facilities for our workforce who will be out there in person delivering those services. So certainly you're right, there's been a rethink in that regard, and certainly I see our libraries clearly as centres of community, not the traditional community centres, as we've debated earlier this afternoon, but centres of community, and certainly that transition's happening there relative to the other services that can be accessed and delivered through them already.
Thank you. And the leader, I hope we can then move to a recommendation or not, as the case may be. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Just to reiterate what Kevin's just said there, I mean, this isn't going to be thousands of social houses or council houses. This is going to be, I would hope at the end of this, a mixture of tenures that'll be private lets, private let, mid-market rent, and private accommodations and social housing mixed in. It's a mix of housing. And I've got to reiterate this, it's housing led, it's not only housing, it's about attracting business, it's about giving opportunities for existing businesses to maybe have purpose-built buildings for them. It's about trying to bring in other businesses to look at the new ways of working to see if there's an opportunity there to do. And we really need to make sure that we're selling this out there and we're making it clear to people that this is about a revitalisation of Dalkeith at the same time as we're moving the workforce to areas a locality. And I think there's an ideal opportunity there, and I would reiterate again, I think one of the important things here is that very quickly the two heads that are leading this can bring back some areas that they would sort of see, so to give elected members a gist of what is possible out there, or maybe even arrange virtual site visits to town centres that have been revitalised in other places.
Okay, Kevin, are you happy to take that on insofar as we're able to travel together?
Yep, yes, thank you, Provost. Certainly endeavour to do that.
Okay, we have, I think, a recommendation that has been extended by the amendment put up by Stephen Kerr and Margot Russell. I hear no one against that. I therefore have a proposer for the extent, Councillor Johnston?
Yeah, I'm going to propose that we don't accept the recommendations and that we send it back for more information. There's too much missing for me to be comfortable and to be absolutely reassured that we can absolutely be certain that this is the right way forward. I think it probably is, but I need more information, more reassurance.
Okay, so the amendment is to note this, but send it back before any formal decision is taken.
Yes, thank you.
There's a seconder for that amendment. Is anyone so minded? We've also had some reassurance in the course of this discussion. Councillor Alexander?
Yes, sorry, I had my hand up to second that. Yes, okay. I think we need more information as well, and we need to, I think it's too much focused on one way of direction and not free enough to move as it should move, as it's required to move by the people of Midlothian.
Okay, whether it's enough vague, you would want this sent back before any formal decision, even on the basis of our discussion is made. Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Provost. I was just going to second Kath's motion.
Okay, Councillor Hackett.
Can I just check with the movers of that motion, what more information, if we can get a bit more detail, because I really don't want to find ourselves in a position where we're coming back 6-8 weeks from now for that information not to be satisfactory to the movers of that. I hope they don't lose that. I hope they lose that motion anyway. But could we get some clarity on what it is exactly that they're looking for that's holding up them making a decision today?
Yeah, I think the digital by default, which is one of the drivers for this, I don't think it should be that. I think it should be digital by choice. And I want to know more about the carbon footprint of the working downtown in the office or at home. What's the benefits to the environment, and how will that affect the council's carbon footprint targets going forward? What about mental health? I mean, it might well be that somebody starts off fine and dandy working in their house. What facilities, how will they access help for their mental health? The delivery of services, the response time for the call centre, etc. The refurbishment of the local facilities in our towns and villages so that we can all accommodate the 20-minute communities. The other thing that concerned me was a school leaver leaving school and going right into working in digital by default. Are we asking that 16-year-old to work in their bedroom because their mum and dad are at the kitchen table and there's no room for them? That worries me about the digital by default thing. I just want more reassurance that we've actually covered all these bases and that it's going to be fine. I think I'm a bit more reassured that it's not all going to be social housing place and we're going to have the problems from Chapel and Craigmill and all these room houses that we've had in the late 40s and 50s when they were built, and just to be reassured that there will be enough amenities for the population of Dalkeith. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a reference amendment. Obviously, that detail of the spec of what the reference back contains would have to be done offline. Councillor Curran and then Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Provost. You know, we've been calling out for regeneration of Dalkeith for years, and here we have an opportunity to do that, and I don't see any reason to delay it whatsoever. I understand the points that Councillor Johnson makes, but this is the very first step in this journey, and the project, the development will evolve. It will evolve, and we can address these concerns as and when they arise, or as and when we want to raise them. It's no carte blanche. We've already established that. We've hopefully got the checks and balances in place with the amendment. So, Provost, I move the recommendations with my amendment.
And is Margot seconding that, I think?
Yes, you have.
Russell and Councillor Alexander wants a word. Councillor Alexander.
Yes, I want to second Councillor Johnson's amendment. I think that we need more information on the type of accommodation that we would be giving the people in Midlothian, in Dalkeith, if we are focusing, and I take it that it's a focus on housing. To me, having lots of families in one place where there's not a huge amount of amenity, I think we really seriously need to look at that and what the amenities will be. So for me, a lot more information on who we would actually be putting into those houses and what the amenities are. That's my.
Okay, that's part of the specification of the refer back. I think we can now move to a vote, a roll call again. The substantive motion is little 1, little 2, and the new little 3 about the town centre plan, which is the motion by Councillor Curran and Councillor Russell. And contrary to that, there is a reference back without formally agreeing anything, which is the purpose of Councillor Johnson and Councillor Alexander's amendment. So it's for the motion or for the amendment. Democratic Services, do you want to carry out the roll call?
Yes, Provost. Councillor Alexander.
For the amendment.
Councillor Cassidy.
Amendment.
Councillor Curran.
Motion.
Councillor Hackett.
Motion.
Councillor Hardy.
Motion.
Councillor Emery.
Motion.
Councillor Johnston. Councillor Johnston.
You're muted, Kath.
For my amendment.
Councillor Leigh Douglas.
For the motion.
Councillor McCall.
For the amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie.
For the amendment.
Councillor Milligan.
The motion.
Councillor Muirhead.
The motion.
Councillor Monroe.
For the motion.
Councillor Parry.
Amendment.
Councillor Russell.
For the motion.
Councillor Smale.
For the motion.
Councillor Wallace.
Amendment.
Councillor Winchester.
For the motion.
Say 11 for the motion and 7 for the amendment.
Thank you. And whatever side you were, can I thank everyone very much for the thoughtful contributions that we've had today. I think it's very important for the executives to know our feelings on this very important topic. We now move on to late item 8.20, which is early learning and childcare expansion. This is something I think we need to resolve before the school term. Can I ask Fiona to speak to the paper on page, that's just item 8.20 at the end of your pack.
Thank you very much, Provost. This report is for information and provides an update on the tremendous progress made by officers from across the council service areas in implementing the 1140 hours expansion programme ahead of the statutory August 2021 date. Section 3, paragraph 3.6 sets out the scale of the challenge that has been faced by officers over the past 15 months by working closely with our funded providers and authority staff. We've been able to open new provision and expand our existing provision. We are delighted that our new Vogrie outdoor nursery has received very good evaluations from the Care Inspectorate in a recent inspection, and that the Scots Corner is another new innovative partnership with the Ministry of Defence that's involved in a unique project with Scotland's Arts. Moving forward with all that has been achieved, we will continue to progress our plans as set out in section 7 of the report, albeit there are challenges that we will require to be addressed, particularly related to the establishment of a sustainable rate to funded providers, the replacement of the nursery admissions management system, which has been delayed, and we will require to establish the impact of the revenue funding quantum and distribution methodology, given the current arrangements do not acknowledge the significant growth across Midlothian. I'm happy to respond to any questions on this paper.
Thank you, much, and I certainly would like to congratulate you on Scots Corner, which is considered very highly in army circles. Clearly, Vogrie is an example of innovation in Midlothian, which perhaps we would never have thought of 10 years ago, and its rating is very encouraging, I think, for all the councillors to show that we can be a really creative council. Councillor Muirhead.
Yeah, Provost, thanks. I think this is a really helpful update on their 1140-hour delivery programme. And I think it's an absolute testament to the efforts that the staff have been able to put in really difficult circumstances, not just with the pandemic, but all the other things that are highlighted in section 3.6 of the report, all the conditions that we're having to operate under. And the other one is they've managed to do it despite the fact that the investment that's been required to do it wasn't as much as we'd hoped. And I suppose you might make the point that, well, you've done it anyway, so did you really need that? We've done it at the expense of flexibility and choice to some extent, and also at the end of the day by making savings elsewhere to make that affordable. But it's an absolutely excellent report. We've managed to do it, ahead of when we were required to do it, and it's an absolute testament to all the innovative ways of working that the staff have introduced and the efforts that they've put in. So I'd want to record my thanks and hopefully thanks to everybody here today for their efforts. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Leigh-Douglas.
Yes, Provost. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Jim's just said, to be honest. I wanted to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's been done to achieve such positive results and congratulate Julie Fox, the Council's staff, providers and third parties for a real effort through what has been a very difficult period. I wanted to ask Fiona, if possible, on the under risks on the paper, it talks about the delays and uncertainty replacing NAMS with CMAS, and I was just wondering, is there any information on this, Fiona? Is this actually anything you see going forward, you know, changing, i.e. being brought forward, or what are the delays? Could you just elaborate on that for me, please?
Yes, certainly. The CMAS officers sit within the Place Directorate and work very closely with education in terms of the new management information service. So clearly, because we have children entering our nurseries, you know, just after their birthday on a month-by-month basis, that you know, there's an incredible amount of work involved in tracking all of the applications and then identifying their placements. The CMAS system was meant to come into play so that all married into the one system that we operate in education, because we use CMAS for all of our school admissions. But unfortunately, just the project has been delayed, and that just means that in terms of workload for staff, there's a significant amount of additional workload because we haven't got that transition before the implementation date of the 1140. So it was hoped that the CMAS nursery, the new system, would be in place for the August statutory implementation, but it's been delayed, and therefore that adds more pressure on our officers at the centre in terms of managing the old system whilst we move to the new system.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hackett.
Just to echo some of the positive comments Councillor Muir had there, said a year ahead of time, with 28% less of the funding needed to carry out the work. I mean, it's just incredible what Fiona and her team have been able to pull off here. I know there's a lot of younger people coming into the system as well, so the ability of nurseries to take in new staff in the middle of this pandemic. You know, speaking personally, I've got nieces that attend local partner providers. I think there's obviously a lot of concern around lockdown and what that meant for new starts, but I think that's been handled really, really well. And some of the transitions there from nursery to school have been really good as well, in light of everything else. And if I can just completely abuse my position, I would like to give a personal thanks to Mrs. Linda DL, who recently retired as a nursery nurse at Kings Park Primary School. She had decades of service. She educated both of my daughters, and I just like to wish her all the best in her retirement and thank her for years of service here at Midlothian Council. Thank you.
Noted. And Councillor Alexander.
Yes, again, I would just like to give my thanks to the Education Department and all the people who work in it that have made this such a huge success in such a short time, and during one of, you know, a world pandemic. So yes, just great work. And I mean, so much work has been put in by the Education Department in so many ways, and to add this on is amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot to make progress during lockdown. So many congratulations to your staff and for the flexibility they've demonstrated. I think that brings the public part of our agenda to an end.